Uh,
All right. Let me get this here, making sure everything is going.
I'm right around the corner. Getting drinks.
Come on. There we go. There we go. I will. Let me get to pop the chat out. Good thing
all
is I
right.
can edit this part here as people come in. Pop chat out so I can see. We'll do live chat. Man, look at
So,
this.
what is the sponsored chip for this episode?
Doritos tangy pickle.
Doritos
Oh,
tangy
that's
pickle.
what you were talking about when I got on.
All right. Hopefully everyone can hear this. Hey everyone, Vince here with crew on the Down Level Podcast, episode 60. Of course, again, this is live. This week we're going to be talking about comic franchises and their film adaptations. We'll go into different topics as we go within that topic, and we'll see how things go. But first off, how is the daylight savings treating you guys?
Getting dark earlier is kind of throwing me off because I'm like, oh, it's later than it is, and then in the morning it's like waking up and the sun is shining through my window.
Everybody makes such a big deal out of this. And yeah, it's like, I mean, the only point in time it really messes with me at all is that first day, right? When you lose an hour, gain an hour, whichever it is, like, man, I feel a little bit extra rested, or man, I kind of feel extra like crap, right? Outside of that, it's like the adaptation to, oh, hey, now's the new time and all that. Like I was literally arguing with the wife earlier today because she heard about the whole thing where Congress is talking about passing the, hey, we're going to stop all this time shifting nonsense,
Well,
and we're
some
just going to jump.
states have already enacted it.
Well,
They're
yeah, like
looking at trying to do it
Arizona's
on a
got that,
federal level.
right? But
Yep.
now it's going to be, federally, they're going to say, okay, everybody, we're going to stop this nonsense. But instead of sticking to the time we have now, right, we're going to do the spring forward, and then they're going to stop. And my wife hates that. She's like, no. I want to keep time as it is now and not then. And there's all the back and forth about how the extra hour of daylight helps with kids and depression
and helps with productivity at work and all that other stuff.
Sure, but who needs to be productive at work? I mean,
nobody.
Yeah, we just want to
What
sleep
is the
and get
point?
paid.
That's right.
This is the problem. We've got all these rich people making fortunes off of our labor. Pass some of that down a little bit. A little bit of communism isn't too bad. Or is it socialism? I can't remember.
Who
I thought
knows
they're the
these
same
days?
thing.
No, they're
My big
actually
problem-
two different things.
I
but-
know.
Oh, we know.
I went over I literally picked up that landmine and I set it down and I dusted it off for you and I said, "Here you go." I knew.
I'm not going to
It's fine.
step on it. I'm just.
You started,
But the thing is,
you towed it. You went over and you
if
towed the
you
edge of
work,
it.
I'm going to tell you something. If you work a night shift, that one day a year when they stick on an extra hour on your work day, that is a what.
Yeah,
Especially if you work 12 hours and all of a sudden it's 13 hours. Man, it's a killer.
Yeah. So yeah, other than that one little bitty shift in time, I don't care.
Well, my house has always been like a time machine. Every clock I have is set is off by 30. I'm ahead in one room and late in another room. So if I'm late, I run to another room where I'm early.
Just figure out which part of the world your time is set to and put a little label on it. That way you can keep track of where you're at.
You did read that some of the states are wanting to create like their own time zones. So one of the reasons why we had this unified time change was so that businesses would know. But now you've got a bunch of states going, well, we're going to be 2 hours ahead, but the one that's in front of us is an hour behind, and the one behind there is 2 hours behind. You're like, all these businesses are not going to be operating at the same time.
Nope.
And when you go to try to get in touch with somebody in a tech service, or I need to call and get some support here, oh, we're closed.
Well, no, see, that's the beauty of it, though, because everything's outsourced overseas and it's 24 hours.
24/7,
so you don't got to worry about it.
We used to call it chasing the sun.
Well, I mean, considering the fact that I do IT stuff, so when I need to call someone in Hawaii, it's 6 hours, from right now. Or, well, actually, it's 6 hours behind me. Same thing with in California. So it's
And
like,
two of
well,
our
my time's
artists
out. I
were-
got to go home.
remember what it was like when we were doing the comic, and 2 of our artists were outside of the country. One was 10 hours ahead of us, and so me and Mark would have to get up in the middle of the night just to have a conference call.
Yeah. So, the one thing I'll say for me is like having to go into the work today to deploy some equipment. Driving home was hell. People don't know how to drive when time changes.
Yeah,
they don't know how to drive when
11 accidents.
Yeah, that was one of the safety things that got brought up before the government was, hey, yeah, there's an increased rate of accidents and other sorts of stuff that happen around. I just want to stick to a singular time because it was kind of cool driving into work and getting to see the blood moon the other day. I completely forgot it was happening, and I was driving along. And
that was an accident. That was an eclipse. It turned the moon red, and it's the last one we'll see for 3 or 4 years.
Something like that.
See that color.
I completely forgotten it was going on. I was just driving to work, and I thought the moon was just behind like a thin bank of clouds or something. And then I noticed that the eclipse was ending, so there was that sliver of it that was starting to turn bright white.
Right, yeah.
And then it clicked. I was like, oh, wait, no, the eclipse is going on tonight. Oh, that's awesome. So driving into work, I got to see as the eclipse slowly started coming to an end, driving in. So that was pretty neat.
Yeah, it is definitely weird. So, but it is what it is. It's been a while since we've had to. At least
I know that when I was younger, there's a lot of things that have changed from when I was younger. Like the way fog works now is more dispersed, and it's higher. Back in the day when I was a kid, you could walk through what used to look like old London because it's only waist deep, and the rest of it looks beautiful and clear at the top, and you're walking through this mist. And then, do y'all remember? I don't know if you guys have ever experienced when a storm got so bad it would become night.
Yes.
When it was literally pitch black outside because of how dense the rain clouds were. I haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah,
I've seen it get pretty shady, but never that kind of pitch black darkness anymore.
Well, and then like the fog you're talking about, right? I'll see sometimes driving if it's like near a body of water, right? So like if there's a small river crossing, then the fields to either side of it and the road right on top of it usually has a pretty decent fog bank sitting on top of it, depending on the level of humidity that morning. But yeah, I've seen that. It might not be maybe as common, but you can still find it in a handful of places here and there.
Well, I mean, back then also, Dad, we had the whole when it would freeze, it'd be so cold that we wouldn't get snow, but we'd get ice. And it would just have like cars coated in ice. So when you rolled down your window,
when you rolled the window, you had a window of ice there. That was when your Uncle Gene would go, "Hey, look," and go around punching out ice windows.
Be like, "Hey, remember that scene of the Terminator when he punches in the station wagon?" No. Anyway, so let's actually get into the topic tonight. With film adaptations. Where do we want to begin? Do we want to, or at least franchises first? I guess our favorite comic franchises, or
wait, are we talking film adaptation? Because
this all is where we want to go.
Again, this is where, as I tell my wife all the time, words have meaning, right? Because this kind of all started about because me and your dad got into a back and forth about, and I think we were 2 ships passing the night at one point because it started off with me talking about how. DC animation, because we got to talking about Green Lantern, Beware My Power, right? Mm-hmm. And how it was, and I think I talked about it on a previous episode about how that movie was a very big.
I think it was when we first saw the advertisement for it, and you had said something about it's only going to work if they turn it into a series, can do all these things with it, and we knew that wasn't going to happen.
So hold on. Because I think you're getting my so I've made comments about the Green Lantern TV show where I
the old CGI one, right?
Right. And where I thought that was going. And my problems when I first saw Beware My Power was I was a little concerned when I saw John put on the ring and the energy flow over his body like it was supposed to be putting on the suit but he was still wearing the jacket. And then later on, they showed in the clip him wearing his normal John outfit. There was just little tiny things.
Well, that
to
was
it.
his pair of glasses. The jacket was supposed to disguise him from anybody who would know who he was, you know?
Yeah, sure. But yeah, and then after I watched it, yes, I did say how it would have been served better as a more long form content, so that you could allow the mysteries and the story and the whodunit aspects of it to breathe a little bit more, because it is so rushed to get to the next point, to where major characters show up, do a thing, and then they go away or die.
It seemed like to me there was a checklist.
Yes.
And they were like, oh, got this. Okay, we got that. Okay, we got that. And they didn't bother to figure out if they had a story.
Yeah.
And then they took on one of the things that's a problem with adaptations. You take something that is an epic, an opus, and you try to truncate it down into, and most animateds are like an hour to an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to try to truncate all this information down to this one little story, and you're going to leave so much out that fans are going to be dissatisfied, and people who've never seen it or read those are going to be going, okay, this feels rushed and there's something missing here.
Yeah You can't I think I mentioned it whenever the last time I talked about it on here, but I mean, there's no secret if you read the description of it, a part of this story is the death of the Corps. It's the destruction of Green Lantern Corps. You can't do that in if you were to devote an entire hour and a half long movie to it, maybe you would. A lot of the story would be dependent on people being aware of certain things and certain characters. Like, you could do Emerald Twilight in a singular movie. You might have to change up kind of the beginning, because I know the first time I read Emerald Twilight, I didn't read the lead up to it. I just was like, oh, Coast City's destroyed. What's going? And later on, I found out it was Mongol and Cyber Superman and all that. But drove them nuts. But it's like you could potentially write a way for Coast City to become destroyed, or how to think it becomes destroyed, and then him lead on to do what he does to the Corps. But the way this movie did it was so just, oh yeah, and the Corps gone. It's like, oh, okay,
there was no weight or gravitas to it. There was nothing there to just heartstring. They didn't tug on heartstring. See, and they did such a great job when they decided, because there was Superman Doomsday, which was a horrible movie, which is very similar to this movie, and it tried to shortcut everything. Then they did the Death of Superman, and then they did the Reign of Superman, which was a 2-movie arc, which did everything that needed to be involved with Superman at the time. You could have, with a little forethought, said, okay, let's pigeonhole this movie into the beginning of that Death of Superman, and have how the events of what happened with Doomsday and everything, how the city gets destroyed, Hal is distraught, he goes to the Owens and says, look, I know that you have the power to do this. You rebuilt Oa, I don't know how many times. Just rebuild the city and bring back my family, my brother, my nephews. And then have him, through that pain and anguish, start to turn on the Guardians. And that puts him in conflict with his friends, the fellow Green Lantern. Right. And the tragedy is that they looked up to him. They worshipped him. He was the best of them. And then he turned on them. And then that's that weight that, hey, you got carrying through the good part of the movie. See, this was like Hal was like, you know what? I just feel like being a bad guy today.
Well, it wasn't even quite that. It was he got injected with badness.
Well, they ruined Parallax.
Yes.
Don't even get me started.
There was a lot. There was a lot that they ruined to that movie. But part of the reason
maybe we should give a warning if you haven't seen this movie.
Look, if you haven't seen the movie, it's hard for me to say go see it, right? I want to, because I want DC to make more Green Lantern content, but I also want them to make better Green Lantern content than that garbage. Because it was so bad. Again, the Justice League were morons in that. Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, who's been friends, they established later in the movie that Oliver Queen and Hal Jordan have been friends for years, have been active as heroes for years. And you're telling me that Green Arrow didn't put two and two together. The second a guy walks in and creates energy constructs that are green,
That he was
doesn't
Green
pause
Lantern.
and
He
say,
didn't
"Hey,
get
hey,
it.
hey, guys, this guy."
And they
wasn't
knew
a-
he in previous movies they'd introduced Kilowog and other Green Lanterns. So, and we know that this is part of their Tomorrowverse.
I was
So
about
it's
to
kind
say,
of
but
standalone.
that's where this and that's the problem. That's why they didn't set up anything in that Death of Superman one, because that was a part of the previous connected universe continuity, which goes back again to it's a problem when they don't really utilize connected universes well, and when they don't prove that they can tell competent stories before they can set up universes. And that's where my issue with these interconnected movies comes from. DC hasn't proven to me that they can consistently tell good stories on film in almost any format. And because of that, I don't want and I don't need and to see these movies where it's like, oh yeah, and this Superman comes in over here and that's how it connects to that Batman over there. No, tell me a good Superman story. Tell me a good Batman story. And then you can give me World's Finest and show me how this one and that one exist.
Yeah, don't do the big crossover. You want to give.
But until you can do that, don't. Just don't. Just give. And especially with these lower tier heroes, right? I mean, Green Lantern, again, the only really great Green Lantern movie, since we're going to be going into this, right, is Emerald Knights. Emerald Knights is such a fantastic animated movie. It's a completely made up story that they use to tell issues from Tales from the Green Lantern Corps. And it's just an anthology of stories showing you the history of the Corps, showing this great big diverse cast of characters all over the place. And it's such a good movie. It's such a great way to show you the way that the Corps is.
You didn't like the other one where he was a cop, kind of. He was learned. They took your First Light, where they took Green Lantern and made them a police force, which is what they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, no. I'm not saying that First Flight's not good. First Flight is good. Emerald Knights was great.
Right.
I thought, and Emerald Knights did, because one of the reasons why Green Lantern is my favorite character, and when I say Green Lantern, I mean all of them, right? I love the concept of the hero type that is Green Lantern. My favorite Green Lantern is Hal, because that's who I got introduced to. That's who I've spent the most time with, and all that good stuff. But as a concept, I love the Green Lantern Corps, and it gives you so much flexibility to tell so many differing types of stories. And that's where I thought Emerald Knights really shone forth more than any of the other DC films, in my opinion, is because it really nailed that idea, that concept. Hey, here's a story that's kind of vaguely Eastern, right? Of a betrayal of a daughter to a warmonger father and all that stuff with Boudica. You had the really hilarious story of the guy going to fight the strongest Green Lantern, Mogo, only to find out that it's the planet, right? You get to see the history of Abin Sur before he goes off and dies, the establishment of Atrocitus before he goes on to make the Red Lantern. Like, so many good stories that were interlaced in that movie, and there's not a pacing problem. There's everything just flows so well together. I love that movie.
And it's because it's each story is truncated, and one of the things that the DC did well was in their showcase short films. They tell nice, tight stories. They aren't origins. They rely on you to know who the character is and their background, and they tell a story within their universe, and they capture the essence of those characters very well. The one thing I liked about Emerald Knight was the fact that it was a group of different people telling different stories. It's a perception thing. Mm-hmm. So you can get a different story from two different people telling you the same thing, the same story, because it's coming from different perceptions. And they did that very well in Batman the Animated Series when the three kids were talking about the time they met Batman. And that is what that reminded me of.
And also, Batman Gotham Knights had that
one episode. Gotham Knights was more of just they were selling the characters from the new movie thing.
Well, I know, but remember, they did that same kind of story in one of the vignettes in that.
Yes. So there's something to be said about short, tight stories, and then the problem runs in, okay, when you've got a good idea, how do you stretch that out to make a film and then tell a good story? I don't believe that we need origin films. These characters are 75, or older. Everybody knows a version of them.
Well, and also, I mean, more than that, right? It's superheroes are not a niche thing anymore. They're not
anymore. No.
You don't have to spend quite as much time getting the regular populace to believe, hey, here's a guy who can, can channel the spirits of animals, right? Or who can fly and shoot laser beams out of his eyes, or who can manipulate energy to form items that he uses to fight bad guys. You don't really need to show people, hey, this is how he got this power. You really just need to show, hey, here's this person, here's their power, and here's them using it, right?
Well, and on top of that, there's another way also. You can just go, hey, look, if you want to know more about this character, pick up the comics.
And that's what comics used to do.
Yes.
On the bottom of a panel, or at the bottom of the page, or at the top, it would tell you, you want to know more about what they're referencing? Go pick up this comic. It was a great sales gimmick. Now,
you want to see the origin of Polaris? Go see this.
A talented, like Steven Spielberg once said when he was filming Jaws, that one of the writers was like, okay, scuba tanks don't blow up like that. The audience is not going to believe that's possible. You're going to have this big explosion and killing shark. It's not going to work. We got to figure out. He was like, look, if I tell a good story, my audience becomes invested. I can lead them and they will believe anything I put on the screen. And I was like, wow. That's deep if you think about it, because when you're telling a tale, you're taking your audience on a journey. But if you keep breaking them out of that journey too much, then things get, to break apart. And if you go back and you look at how many times Jaws was edited, every time it went to television or it went to another country and stuff like that, and you try to watch them, it's like it's just disjointed. It doesn't fit. He was telling a story, and accidents can be great. The shark not working, that's fantastic. We have to learn how to scare the audience without showing it, which is one of the oldest tropes in movie making. Well, animation is no different than movie making. The medium's slightly different, but you still have to follow the same, techniques. You have to storyboard. You have to get those beats. When you're storyboarding, you look, okay, when I get to this point, that audience should be crying. When it gets to this point, that audience should be out of their seat and screaming. And if you can't do that and take this person on a ride, you've accomplished nothing. Except you want to make all your money now, first week it opens, because it doesn't have legs. So
that, and it doesn't have the video market to pick it up afterward.
There's no second. And that brings me to another thing about all this stuff transitioning to digital. Without it being on a hard copy, a medium that can be stored and saved, it's going on a hard drive somewhere, and we know how easy something can be wiped out and lost. There are tons of movies we're never going to get to watch because they were transitioned over to digital at some point, and then through licensing and lawsuits and everything else, all of a sudden the digital copy disappears. Sometimes it's intentional. If you go back and you look at who is the guy who directed 2001: A Space Odyssey?
Stanley Kubrick.
Stanley Kubrick. He was a person who was like, once he had his cut of the film, he wanted everything else destroyed. He even put it in his will and any contract that once he was done, there's no more footage. People had to steal it and take it home. And then finally it pops up sometime for us later on and we get to see. And sometimes those scenes change how the story flows completely.
Well, and the important thing about animation, right, especially in the early days of animation before we had all of the CG, was that you could tell grander, more fantastical stories through animation. And I still believe that's the case, right? Like, even though we have CGI, right, what's the first thing that people complain about with even like a lot of the recent Marvel films? One of the biggest complaints that people have that comes up is how a lot of the CGI looks shoddy, right? I mean, that was That was one of the major complaints going into like She-Hulk and all that, was just how terrible it looked.
Well, and it's that whole uncanny valley. You mean you're
Right.
looking
Yeah.
at
Once you push it too far, you get exactly into the uncanny valley. Whereas with animation of a lot of different types, you can do so much more than you can with
but
live
remember,
action.
audiences are less forgiving now than they used to be.
This is true.
If it was a good story, people were a little bit more forgiving. You still got scared even though you knew it was a man in a monster costume. You had to be able to suspend reality enough to enjoy it.
Or it was clearly a clay figure that was not even in the same space.
Hey, don't knock stop animation. That was our cartooning before there was cartooning. Those were our special effects.
Ray Harryhausen.
You go back and you look at all the great movies.
Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and
yeah.
But I mean, that's where with animation you can do so much more for so much stuff, and I don't understand this obsession, right? That's one of the reasons why Disney remaking all these movies as live action is so frustrating to me.
But they're not adding any.
You're not adding anything new to it. You're tweaking the story a tiny bit, and then you're just retelling the exact same thing over again. I have more desire to see the ones that go way out into left field with a story, or are diverging from something hard enough that it's like, okay, I'm seeing something new this time. I'm not just seeing the Disney version of Cinderella again, but this time real people, because the real people side of it doesn't add a new dimension. It doesn't add new anything to it. It's just them repackaging and reselling us the same crap again.
Then they don't even do that, because if you look, the characters are changed to fit the sensibilities of today.
Yeah.
And it loses some of that innocence, or it loses some of the stuff that there's things we're not allowed to talk about anymore. And so you've got to change that in this movie to bring it up to the standards of today. It loses something.
Well, and it not only that stuff, but like one of the best examples I saw was where someone actually did a comparison of The Lion King, where you see the death of Mufasa, right? The stampede and death of Mufasa on one screen, which is the live action, and the stampede and death of Mufasa on the other. And because over here they're trying to be true to live action, so there's no real expressions, right, to the lions.
Oh, yeah,
they're just a cat, right? And maybe you see a little bit of eyebrows or whatever. Comparing that to the original version, where it's much more anthropomorphic, so you have more exaggerated features and expressions. It pushes the emotion so much stronger and so much better.
And you got to make sure that the music is there to back up that emotion. Now, one of the things is, did you see when there was a group of people, and I think they were some of the people who started the whole deep fake thing, where they went back and reanimated the faces of all the creatures, gave them that emotion, and they show it side by side, and you're like, I want to see this movie. I don't want to see this movie.
Well, you take out that whole thing, that the relatability from the audience. That was the reason why Lion King worked so well, is because we could relate to the emotions of the characters. When you're trying to just make real animals reenacting these things, it doesn't. There's nothing there for us to. It's like Transformers, When we watch Transformers, we watch the Autobots because they were more human than us as humans ourselves, and their battle that they were dealing with, compared to what Michael Bay did with his.
Don't bring up Bay. We've hijacked this whole thing so much. Colin, save us. Bring us back to our core here.
Yeah, what were we supposed to be talking about?
Hey, I'm still stuck on daylight savings time and how it got dark earlier than it normally does, and my big oversized black wallet disappeared somewhere in it. So
someone stole your booty, so you're going to go back and pirate it, right?
Arrgh.
Hey, I've already had a few brews. Why not?
You know what a pirate's favorite peanut butter is?
No.
You wore the hat, so you're getting it. Peter Pan.
Go to your room.
Boom. There you go.
The original joke was, what's Hook's?
What is a pirate's favorite letter? R.
Yeah.
Come
Oh,
on,
good
you're
Lord.
a dad, David. You got to get these dad jokes.
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
no, I got something.
No.
You have to pass this on for generations now.
There's a level of dad joke where I have to kind of pause for a minute and be like, should I? Maybe not now.
No.
Dude, I dude it, or do I don't dude it? I dude it.
I torture my kids in other ways as best I can.
Yeah. When you say that, I'm reminded of Star Wars and the droid upside down in Jabba's palace, and the other droids going with the, and
Yeah.
how does a droid feel that pain? Just like,
Didn't matter.
even as a child watching that, I was like, I don't think that would work.
Well, I mean, if you program something in where the
But why
droid
would you-
feels it
Why
through
program it like that to
the
feel
software.
pain?
But he's not really feeling. He's just
No, he's
feeling
not.
the program that's supposed to hurt instead of it actually. So you could just pretend to touch him, and as long as he perceives that he's being burned, he's going to go, this actually.
We're
the
talking
heated
about a movie
fan
where
was
there's
beating.
guys that have the ability to levitate things and fight with blades.
Hey.
Okay.
Yeah, space magic.
Space
I mean,
magic.
come on. 3PO was neurotic all the way across the board. It doesn't surprise me that other robots have issues.
I got to agree with my son. Anything that would have space horses in it is
Yeah,
just
space horses, man. Come
stretching
on.
it beyond.
Space horses, we didn't get that true treasure until the very end. Okay.
Yeah.
Up until then, we didn't even know space horses were a thing. And then, episode 9 gifted us with that joy.
I just, it's just like, all right, we're gonna roll for it. This, and this equals this. The last one's, 69 space horses. I don't know how
Well,
that's
you
got
gotta
to
ask yourself.
of all the times of what you could do with
Yeah,
that.
did they accidentally roll on the wrong RPG tables when they were
Yeah,
writing?
those were horrible rolls. Somebody didn't roll ahead of time to get all their bad rolls out. But I mean, think about it. What does it say about us when the last 3 Star Wars movies, when technology is like at its peak, Ewok movies, television made movies were better than those pieces of junk.
I mean, look, I'll go on record as saying when Force Awakens came out, I was like, you know what? It's not the best thing in the world, but it's not awful.
Oh no! Can you imagine this? Okay, set this up. J.J. Abrams, I've got this fantastic idea, and he's got this storyboard, and he's telling what's going to happen. And 2 guys who worked on the original movies are sitting there looking at each other, going, It seems very familiar. Oh, been there, done that. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's new.
But in fairness, that's all J.J. Abrams does.
Yeah,
He just-
rehash.
He just says, "Hey, look, I can do. Hey, you remember this thing that Spielberg did? I can do it too. Hey, you remember this over here?
I can do it better, faster, and cheaper.
Look, I can just do lens flares all over the place with it, and it'll be completely different, and it'll be great." It's like,
I mean,
wait,
he had so much hope. I mean, what was the movie about the alien? 8
Oh, the-
millimeter?
the
that
train-
was a
That
total
narrows
different
it
movie.
down.
What was the movie, Vince?
8 millimeter.
8 millimeter. It was 8 millimeter. I thought that
Oh,
was.
no,
the
no, no,
movie.
no,
Yeah.
sorry.
That was a
Super
total
8.
different
That's
movie.
Super 8. That's I'm sorry. That's
It
yeah.
was Super 8.
That's,
Okay.
Super 8.
Boy, don't
I
go
only
down
said
that
8
movie,
millimeter because somebody
Nudie
else
hole.
did. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
man.
Nicolas Cage did look a little off in that movie.
in
I'll
that
give him
movie.
that.
It was all that CGI work he had done.
that's right.
Yeah.
They cast
It
the
still
But-
hadn't. It still hadn't got reset from Face Off. All right, so
No,
let's
and if you
bridge
can
it back
suspend
to
your
let's bridge it
imagination
back
for
to the
Face
top.
Off, Star Wars should be just an easy flow for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's go from Space Horses back to Marvel. The oversized, what is it? The goats in Love and Thunder.
Oh.
What were those things?
The
most
screaming
annoying
goats.
things in that movie.
I loved them. I
loved them
to
too.
death.
I want one just so I can put it out in my front
It's
yard
like
and let
screaming,
it scream
fainting
in the middle of
goats
the night.
on fucking steroids.
Could you
Sorry.
imagine if one of the goat from Jurassic Park was one of the screaming goats?
Oh,
Would
see now you got 6 degrees of Pratt there.
No, what you do is you take that scene where the T-Rex comes out and he does the roar, and then you
And then the goat screams and he goes,
And then cut into the goats. and then just back and forth, roar, roar,
But it wasn't the bat; it was that scream that could just melt your face off. You know, it's like the T-Rex comes up and roars, and then the two goats are standing there, and then one goes, "Hold my beer."
Okay, so we've completely just gone off the rails. Anyway, let's talk about like comics that we would love to have seen adapted into an animated film.
All right,
yeah, that's a good one.
Like, you know what? I'll start it off. You know what I would have liked to have seen? Instead of Watchmen being live action, I would have loved to have seen it all animated.
Animated. So did
because
you like
could
the
have done
animated
a lot
segment,
more with it?
The you know, because if you've read the actual comic, there was a story within a story. And
the Black Sails.
Yeah. So did you like the animated one that they did for that?
Yeah, it was okay. But I'm talking about, you know, if they really wanted to go back and do the Watchmen, I mean, the movie was okay, but there was so much more that could have happened with it. If they gave it to, say, all right, Vinny, one of the biggest anime companies. I keep wanting to call them Lightfoot, and that's not right. But
what do they do?
Now you gotta ask me questions.
I mean, I would like what?
He's trying to remember a name of you and ask him a question.
Yeah. No, they did the most recent one that they did that I liked was the Supernatural one.
Oh.
Madhouse.
Yeah.
Now, if you gave Madhouse permission to do a Watchmen movie, that would be a lot more in line with what the comic book was.
Now, the one that they did was a series of films for Supernatural, because there was like 7 episodes of it.
No, there was a lot more than that.
I thought there was only 7. Maybe there was only 7 I actually liked.
They did a whole season. There's like 22 or 23. And the last 2 were the only ones that featured Jensen Ackles as Dean. Jared Padalecki did the entire season of them, but Jensen Ackles only did the last 2, which was it was a 2-part based off of the Hell's Gate story part.
If you're going to use Jensen Ackles in anything, it better be damn Red Hood. I'm sorry. He's the best friggin' Red Hood there is.
Yeah. Yes, his Red Hood was very, very good. And his Batman wasn't horrible.
No.
No, and I didn't realize it was him at first until I was like, man, why do I know who this is? And then I went and looked up and realized it was him doing the Batman.
And there's another one coming out where he does it again. He's Batman again.
And what's funny, what he did a something where I think it was an episode in Supernatural where they're at like a comic shop or a con or something, and he's standing before the Batman and he's looking at it and he goes, maybe later, or something like that. I remember that where he's like, yeah, you're going to be mine. A little bit of foreshadowing from my future. I don't know. I think it was a Red Hood outfit he was wearing.
It was something along those lines.
Yeah.
But why don't we settle on a category of comic? Because like with everything we've talked about, long-running comic series don't always lend themselves to being a single film.
Right.
So what about shorts or single, like The Nail or something else? Injustice was too long too. It just seemed like something was missing from it. I enjoyed it, but it just seemed.
David, you got anything?
Well, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, you threw out the Nail. I've said before that I love The Nail and Another Nail, and I've been waiting for them to do those 2 forever because they're such good stories and it's such an interesting take on the characters. And plus, The Nail at least is very much a Green Lantern forward story because it's all Hal trying to figure out what's going on.
Well, and then there's, did you ever read Cult?
Cult,
which was a Batman, and it was about a religious guy who was taking the homeless of Gotham and turning them into I can't remember if they were vampires or something else, and then Robin figures it out before he does. He gets kidnapped and then it's Batman all out of his element.
I'm not familiar. I have to go look it up. My brother might have read it.
There was also one where Batman was going against the church. It was very V for Vendetta like.
That's one that could be animated.
So I mean, like we're focusing on the big two, right, in terms of that. But there's one comic that they did games for that I really enjoyed, and I think it would make a pretty interesting series to at least do an arc or two from the comic. Was The Darkness, right? We don't have a lot of R-rated.
No, we don't have a whole lot of
comic series or comic series that would lend themselves to more of an R rating in terms of story wise. And we have the old Spawn animated series. We have the handful of Hellboy movies, but I really like.
Oh, we had Max. Max was a great.
Yes.
I'm surprised that Top Cow has never really. They did the Witchblade series way back.
Way back, and then they did.
They did the animated. They did the animated Witchblade.
Yeah. And what was the other Image comic that was done as a single? It was
Witchblade and Darkness aren't Image; they're Top Cow.
Well, I was thinking, like when you're doing what is it when you do a
Savage Dragon was another one that they did an animated deal for.
Animated, but that was a series, wasn't it? Savage Dragon was a series.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wildcats, or what is it? The one you were talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah,
Wildcats.
That was done as a setup for a series, but the first episode was kind of done as a movie, and to try to sell it. But what is that called when you do that? The first episode of something.
A pilot.
Pilot. Thank you. There were some really good pilots at the time that didn't get picked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you got something like the Amazing Screwhorn Head that gets something.
Yeah. Well, and then Tick. Man, I loved Tick. And the way they handled the original cartoon. Man.
Yes.
So, that's the one thing that we've never really gotten is we've never gotten a true to form Mirage comic version of the Turtles animated movie. And I'd love to see The Last Ronin done as a movie.
Oh, I would, but I want it's so long and it's such an epic. It's got to be a 2-part or 3-part.
Yeah.
Well, that's where the funny thing about that was they kind of almost did The Last Ronin before The Last Ronin, except the Turtles not all the Turtles were dead. But
the Nickelodeon one?
In the CGI Nickelodeon series, they did do the one where they went and it was in the far future, right? All the Turtles were gone except for one. The one that was left over was Mikey. And he was going around fighting against, Mad Max style bad guys. And you eventually find out that I think
Leo was the main villain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
but I mean, it was hard to get into that with Mikey running around with a pair of underwear on his head. And it was not just underwear, it was stained underwear. I was like,
Well, remember when he went into the Dimension X and was there for a period of time, like he was Smart Mikey, and they were like, "How are you like this?"
Well, it wasn't so much he was Smart Mikey; it's just that Mikey's brain is so chaotic and crazy that it just works
it just works at Dimension X. Yeah.
Dimension X.
Well, that goes back to when we had the original Turtles, and then we had another series of Turtles that were really true to the comics. But they were bulkier. They were
that was
huge.
You talking about the animated?
Early. It was where they took them into space. It was the first one with Fugitoid, and it had the Triceratons and all of that, and it captured the essence of what was in the Mirage comics.
Well, then Jack Kirby.
And then in the end, they teamed up with the black and white Turtles that were straight out of Mirage.
Mm-hmm.
There were their characters, and then there were the old Archie kind of ones, and that was such a great ending for that series. And how when they showed the old guys, the original look of the Turtles, where their legs are long and their feet are big and their hands are huge, but they're thin and their face is all gaunt, and the black and white fades as they go back to their dimension after they save the dimensions, and they just fade. And just the way they had him standing was straight out of the comic.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I was like in heaven when I saw that. And it was just a few seconds of footage, and it satisfied me for the whole movie.
What else?
But yeah, then we get Batman and the Turtles.
Batman Turtles, yeah.
I was like, ugh. I liked it, but it's not what I want to see in the Turtles. There are so many storylines in the Turtles comic that I would love to see adapted into a movie. And if anything lends itself to having movies done about them, it's the Turtles. But don't give me Michael Bay's Turtles. Don't give me the Archie Turtles, which I love that, and I understand that's what you grew. That's what I bought you, and it's the ones you love. But that was not my Turtles. I want a hardcore ninja fight. People getting hurt, and make it feel like there's a danger to them.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I really thought that the third series, right, the CGI Nickelodeon one, struck a really good balance between the kind of kiddie, fun, animated, like the Archie stuff, and then the violent horror-ish elements too. Because when people mutated in that series, it wasn't some adorable.
Oh, yeah. No, they weren't adorable. Horrifying. Well, I mean, Ice Cream Kitty was pretty adorable.
Yeah, Ice Cream Kitty is the best.
Ice Cream Kitty is fantastic. And then
I want one in my freezer.
that series just struck such a good balance and did so many good things. Like I love that series from beginning to end. And then they literally got all the way through. They defeated Super Shredder, and they're like, okay, we're kind of out of stuff to tell. What do we do now? Screw it. We're just going to do random stories.
Well, they did Tales of the Turtles, which was the first offshoot comic.
Yeah.
Those standalone stories were directly from, well, not directly, but there were the Turtles, which is the mainstream story. But then they did one-shots, like Michelangelo and all them. And then they were like, okay, so how do we do that to expand our library? So they created Tales of the Turtle, and they were all independent stories of the main storyline.
Yeah.
The one thing they did was make sure it didn't corrupt the main story. These all had to exist with what was going on in the main line. And I loved it. And I kind of enjoyed that in the Tales of the Turtle. You weren't like, okay, what happens if I don't have a VCR and I miss the next episode and I got to wait until they decide to re-air it when reruns come back on. These were tight little stories, and they were completed when they were over.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch the new one that was also done by Nickelodeon, but it was animated, and they had this real. So Raphael was really like the leader and everything.
Yeah, I was about to say I read the description of the way it was going to be, and I saw a couple clips of it, and it just felt like all of the turtles except for Raphael were Mikey, right? Like Leo felt like Mikey, Donatello felt like Mikey. Mikey felt even more like Mikey.
Like Mikey, yeah. See, Donatello was like an autistic kid with Reed Richards' intelligence in it.
Right. It was. I'm sorry. It's Smart Mikey. Donatello was Smart Mikey. Leo was just regular Mikey, and then Mikey was even more Mikier Mikey, and then Raph. So, and just based on that, I get they were trying to go for a new direction, right? You can't just keep retelling the same stories of the Turtles over and over because we've kind of seen it and been there and done it, right? But following the previous series that did such an amazing job of nailing what I felt like the spirit of the Turtles, like just the mainline Turtles were, that was such a departure that I just couldn't bring myself to watch it. It just, when I started to, I'm just like, this doesn't feel right, and I never went back to it. Now, the Netflix movie, right, that they came out with.
Which is after the series ends. I loved it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so
that was really, and they brought Casey in, Casey's always been one of my favorite characters. And I was like, okay, how are you going to do this? Because they did this with Dragon Balls. They're taking somebody from the future whose world has been destroyed. They come back here and hoping to fix everything. But it never fixes it for the person who has to go back. They're always going to go back to their existence, because once you deviate, you've created a new timeline.
Yeah.
And so then he stays. And I was like, okay, that works for me. I didn't have to worry about, because once I got to like him, I was like, okay, I don't want him to die. I was afraid they were going to kill him. I really was, because he would make that sacrifice that elevated Leo to become the leader he should have been.
Mm-hmm.
But every character in that Netflix movie got their time in the light, and then we finally got to see them come together like brothers, like they should have been all along. You know, they were always kind of trying to outshine each other, and I felt that broke them up.
I might going back and trying to because the series ended after like 2 seasons, if I remember right. It fizzled out pretty quick because there was a lot of hate for it for a bunch of different reasons. So I might try and go back and go rewatch it and then catch the movie and see if now that I'm removed far enough away from the previous series that I won't feel quite as icky watching this one.
It's definitely one of those things where it's like not for me. It's not one of those things I'm going to watch. But you know, it's sad that this didn't get the legs it needed to continue on. But that's why I'm hyped about that little short film that was done. That looked like it was taking some of the Nickelodeon characters and animating them and having them go through time. I thought that was
through time. Well, and the fact that it took them through the game, Turtles in Time. They were drawing directly from that game.
So I mean, I would be down for that animation with them. But I mean, there's been so many different versions of iterations of the Turtles now, considering you have the Image comic twice. You had what? Who was it?
Devil's IDW.
IDW. Yeah, IDW's got him now. And because when it was Image twice, it was Dreamwave doing the comic, and that was the one that was really good before IDW got the reins, because at that time you had like, what was it? Splinter died. Donnie got his arm ripped off, and they had to put a cybernetic, or he almost got completely destroyed. Because
now you remember though, you know how we always talk about sometimes you tie into the universe and the universe kind of feeds off.
Yes.
When we used to play the Turtle game back from the Palladium, way back before any of these were cartoons, except for the Archie one, what did we do with the Turtles? Yeah. I took them into the future, where there was Shredder, as he turned himself into a cyborg so he could live forever. And then the first thing that happens is the Turtles get there, and I lead you guys on a mission, and they get injured, and we start having to replace our parts, and they become cyborg. And I always made sure one turtle maintained all of himself. But I wanted to augment and add things because I always loved, what was the robot turtle called?
Oh, you're talking about
Metalhead.
Metalhead. I was like, man, I love him. If you just give him a RoboCop kind of attitude, you know, and just bulk him out and like, you know, Ed 209 him. You know,
it's kind of sad though, because I miss when we used to play, because we ended up taking them into the actual Rift's world with Palladium and with our Robotech characters, and then the Palladium characters we made for Rifts, and it was like we were playing like 4 or 5 characters in this adventure that we were doing, and then we just never finished it.
Yeah, the one of the last ones was when we introduced Robotech. One of the ships come crashing through one of the portals, lands on that place, and then all of a sudden we have this mobile base that was inspired by that figure toy I had. I was like, man, this fits right into Robotech. And
we ended up going into Mexico and fighting vampires, and that's about
the
last game we did.
And that was when we were using needle guns instead of the needles. We shaved them down and made like wooden spikes, and so we'd shoot them. Because in the game, the wood immobilized them. It was painful. It didn't kill them unless you burned them in the sun. I don't even remember if you could kill them by staking them in the heart.
Even if you stake them in the heart, they eventually just, you know, would like die and just sit there until you took the stake out. Then they would just regenerate. They didn't even need blood. It was just like, oh, we're just gonna completely regrow ourselves.
And then I came up with the genius idea of making cockroaches turn into vampires, flying cockroaches.
That's horrifying.
It is horrifying.
Oh, I did it because we were coming back from San Antonio, and we stopped to eat at this little hole-in-the-wall restaurant. And as you walked in, there was, you know, like in the entrance, a bunch of video game wall. And when we were like, okay, we're going to hit the video games as we leave. So we eat, and we're all walking out, and we're like, okay, which game we're? And there was a big old wood roach on one of them, and it wouldn't go away. I couldn't get it to leave. And then I don't remember if it was Mark or if somebody hit the screen and it pissed it off. Excuse me, don't mean to cuss. Made it very angry, and it starts flying around and dive bombing us and trying to, and everybody was running. The girls were screaming, trying to get away, and we eventually came home, and I was like, at the back of my head, mimic. Yeah, except I'm talking roaches, and I was like, we need to. I need to figure out a way to bring this into a game, because I was always trying to bring elements of the movies we love, like I was doing Predator and all kinds of other things in our worlds. And Palladium was a great game system. It allowed you to modify any pre-existing game or create your own characters and then meld them into anything. And then I had this book which was a how to convert everything to any game system that existed at that time.
You still have it somewhere.
I still have it. It's in the other room. Yeah. But we're off track again.
So I guess you're the only one who hasn't come up with a comic that you would have liked to have seen adapted.
Since they did there were some great what ifs that I really wanted to see it done as a story. I guess if I had my wish to go back and do something, I would want to do a good change that. Excalibur 2000, which was almost a prelude to Gargoyles, but Gargoyles wasn't even a thought. It was what happens if the Fays and some of the villains from King Arthur's time come into modern time and start trying to take over the world. And all the heroes from King Arthur's time were reincarnated but didn't know who they were. And then all of a sudden Arthur wakes up on Avalon and climbs out of his own grave and has no idea of how to handle technology or anything else. He's the only one who still remembers what had happened before. And then he goes on a quest to find Excalibur. Then he finds each one of his original Knights of the Round Table. And once they meet him, it's kind of a shock to them and they remember everything, including their life now. And it was a great combination of cyberpunk, that, would you call it? I don't want to call it fantasy, but that whole romantic Excalibur, that kind of story, King Arthur story, Robin Hood type story. And then when in elements that were like, okay, I betrayed you in the past, Tristan had done something wrong. All the characters, all of a sudden they remember those betrayal and they're trying hard not to repeat the mistakes of the past, but they're like, there's some kind of destiny that's kind of making everything replay again. And it's like, how do you fight your own destiny? And it was just really great. It ran 12 issues. I would love to see that as a movie, because you could do that as a movie.
It would be a cool... I actually have two of them, but one of the things that just popped in my head would be a cool animated movie is, was it Terminator Burning Earth? The outro. As long as you don't do the ending one, the ending part of it. That's the one where Connor's a girl at the end, right? No. This is the one that Alex Ross did.
Burning Earth, which is the one where they actually go in and destroy Skynet. Yeah, man, that was really good.
Yeah, that was the whole. Was it Alex Ross doing the artwork for it?
The artwork for it, yeah. It was like paintings. Well, he did some of them.
Because I think that was the transition between when Now Comics had the Terminator comics, and then what was it? Dark Horse got the rights.
And see, but now we're getting, because we're doing the whole fantasy thing, because we kind of agreed not to kind of stick with comics, and because Terminator was a movie first, it's that franchise transitioning over into
but
comics.
It was a comic though that never got adapted into anything, and it is one of those ones that if you're a Terminator fan, you need to pick up. It's great.
So many great comics, back in the day.
Spider-Man 2099 has not actually officially gotten any kind of animated
other than having a cameo in the original animated series, but he wasn't really him. And in Into the Spider-Verse,
I wanted to stay away from the, like David said, the big two, the main characters.
Well, hey,
because there's so many. I mean, if you're going to do that, Once in Future Past, the X-Men story, wasn't what was it? The one where Kitty Pryde has to go back.
Yeah. Well, they've never done that as an animated. They tried to do that
Days of
awful
Future
movie.
Past.
Yeah. Days of Future Past. That's right. Once in Future Past. That was another King Arthur book. Sorry.
King Arthur book. I was like, man, you guys got anything?
No,
I mean, there's just it's. I mean, it kind of goes back to where the kind of conversation between us started before, where I was talking about how I kind of was I was a little saddened whenever they decided to start going to all these interconnected universe stories, because so much of the early DC films were adaptations of either Elseworlds or just small comic runs, right? Like that's where you got New Frontier, right? Under the Red Hood was that Justice League Doom was based on the Tower of Babel story. And it seems really like DC's gone away from, hey, we're going to go and do adaptations of our existing stories, and instead we're going to try and tell bastardized versions of those stories into a new format, but intermix a whole bunch of them together for some weird reason.
What I would like to see them do is pick up with Earth 1. And create the stories from Earth 1, the Batman, the Wonder Woman, Teen Titans, Superman, and kind of.
Well, I mean, the story that me and my brother have talked about a lot of times, how they could have set it up for the current, DC universe would have been. I'm still waiting for them to do Kingdom Come. I mean, why is that one still hanging out there in the wind somewhere?
Because I think of. I mean, especially after they did Injustice, why would you not do Kingdom Come? Yeah. But I think they had originally planned to do that at one point, because I remember rumors that was on the slate of film. Because remember, they used to produce a slate of, here are the animated films coming out, and then half of them disappeared. Like Teen Titans, the Judas Contract was planned a long time ago before we actually got it.
Well, we got The Killing Joke and
Dark
Knight Returns. I mean, the thing is that there's certain books apparently there. I mean, why haven't we gotten Nightfall as a film?
Yeah.
At least two or three. I mean, you could do the whole him getting his back broken, Azrael taking over, and then him taking back up the mantle.
You can do nostalgia by bringing what's his name back to do the voice.
Oh yeah. The honestly, the Batman storyline, I would love to see them do a 2-parter for would be No Man's Land, right?
Which follows Nightfall, right? Because wasn't Nightfall was the whole thing where all the Arkham villains escaped and they beat the Batman.
Bane lets them all out so that Batman has to fight his way through all of them.
All of them to break him.
Worn down, and that's why Bane's able to beat him. No Man's Land starts with, I forget how it happens, but some kind of like...
There was an earthquake in Gotham.
Big cataclysm. It causes everyone to wall it. The problem with it is it skews towards Arkham City, right? Because Arkham City kind of did that storyline. So, sadly, it might confuse people a little bit, but No Man's Land just had a bunch of cool moments where, like, you find out that who was it? Poison Ivy had taken over the entire.
She was a park, a city park, and then she'd become like a good guy but bad guy, where she wasn't just trying to kill all humans. She was actually helping the homeless and protecting children. So she had you saw that was where you actually saw Poison Ivy start making a character growth that then played up much later in other issues, other comics. Everybody's done that now. Even the Batman did their take on that. Nolan, the second movie with all the bridges getting blown up, or was it the third one? It was the third one. Yeah, that's straight up there because
Sean Connery Bane.
There was an earthquake, the bridges broke, and the city flooded. And the government decided, you know what? All the nut jobs are trapped on that other side. We're going to Snake Plissken this thing and build a wall around it, and we're going to let them take each other out. And, and I remember them, like, some of the heroes, like, you got to fix this. We got to go in and save it. They were like, nope. And then you had all the other heroes who were on the outside who snuck in to help. And I loved how they split up the city and made the baronies. Like Joker had his thing, Penguin had his. And then they did the same thing in Gotham, the TV series. I was like, so it's been overused. Some of these stories, they take from what's good out of here, and then they put it together. And then they can't tell the bigger story anymore because you've already used those elements. And the one thing in film, no matter what you're doing, you don't like to reproduce yourself.
Yeah, I want to tell my own story. I don't want to tell somebody else's. That kind of garbage.
The one story, the one series of stories that DC hasn't told yet, and this is a part of our chat before that I'm honestly shocked that they haven't gotten to because of how well known and how well beloved they are, is Sinestro Corps War and the Blackest Night.
Blackest Night.
Yeah. How have you not done those stories yet?
Yeah.
Like I get it's Green Lantern, and so he's not as well known and out there as Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman, but Blackest Night was a huge comic event that eclipsed everything.
But if you're going to do Blackest Night, why not you're going to have to introduce the Anti-Monitor. You're going to have to introduce the Black Hand. You're going to have to do all these things to make that story play out because
you don't even need Anti-Monitor. Anti-Monitor only really functions as the Black Power battery. You could wave some bullshit and there be the battery. You could just have it be siphoning energy from Necron himself and him be the origin point of it, and them just having to crack the battery to break him out to get the ending the ending portion of it that you need. Like there'd be a way of writing around and writing out some of what happens in that series. And it would definitely need to be at minimum a two-parter to be able to capture even a fraction of enough of the story to make it work. But it's really just one of those adaptations that, like I said, I'm surprised. Or even Sinestro Corps Wars. Sinestro Corps War, you have very little that you need to establish. It's like if you've watched half the stuff that deals with Green Lantern or even the old series, Sinestro's in there. You're vaguely aware of him. If you've watched any of the movies of him, you're aware of him, right? And him being there, that you should be able to tell that story to a degree. And that could, if we're talking interconnected universes, your Sinestro Corps War, just like in the comics, could be partially what leads into the Blackest Night. So you could do essentially a 3-part film leading off with the Sinestro Corps War, laying seeds in there here and there, ending it, leading into the Blackest Night, and then telling your Blackest Night story. Like it's very doable. I
miss that we seem to want to do a limited story, and we want to do standalone. There was a time when you did a story, it was a 5-episode. It was either 1-hour episodes, but 5 30-minute episodes. You got 2.5 hours out of it, which is a good movie. Because most animateds, like I said before, they try to keep it like that 112 to 118 minute long. And I don't know how you call that a movie, but go back and start doing a 5-part big event series to draw your audience in. It's what is the story where the Justice League were tampering with people's minds to hide one single identity crisis?
Yeah,
man, that is screaming to be done, because you're taking heroes out of their element You have heroes upon it's hero on hero violence, and it addresses a lot of what it would take to have something like the Justice League exist. You know, because you've got a lot of egos, you have a lot of different personality types, and there are going to be some knockdown, drag out fights. And I miss that. You know, one of my favorite in Justice League International was when Hal just lays into Guy Gardner, or the fight between Batman against it was against Guy. Guy was everybody's favorite punching bag, right?
The one punch.
The one punch, yeah.
When he knocks him out, and then Blue Beetle stands in the background. One punch, one punch,
one punch, and that became an ongoing gag in the comic because he kept poking at him, and Guy's like, okay. What about Legends? Do you remember the DC Legends when the what was the one, the Dominion or whatever, the ones that had the red circle on their head? What were they?
It was Godfrey was the it was a John Byrne story, right?
Yeah, and it had
Godfrey, whatever his name was, was the antagonist for a long time.
Well, yeah, it was the heroes fighting against each other. I think Maxwell Lord or whatever his name was tried to get the Justice League. That was kind of a relaunch to certain characters because it came quickly after Crisis on the Infinite Earths. You got to see Guy's origin, and then it led into the Dominion War and some other things. Hell, man, I want to see Vigilante done or Checkmate done as an animated movie. Both of those were some of my favorite comics. And here's the big one, right? Warlord. Why have we not gotten a Warlord animated movie? Wow. Travis Morgan, man, you know, an American pilot crash lands into Middle Earth and has to fight sorcerers, dinosaurs, and everything else. And the only thing he's got with him is his Magnum. And it's the Dirty Harry Magnum from, it was the Automag, and I can't remember which movie that was introduced in. But I love that. And then the fact that Mike Grindle, I think, was the artist. He also worked on Green Arrow. So the two characters looked identical. Oliver had yellow hair, yellow beard. Travis Morgan, white hair and a white beard. But when they looked at each other, and when they did a team up later on, when Travis had to go out and get ammunition and try to bring things like medicine back to the Middle Earth, Inner Earth, he meets up with Ollie, and they're like looking at each other, and it's a running gag for a little while. Like, you know, was Dad sneaking around? You know, because they just look so much alike. You know, I want to see some of that.
So have they done a lot of the Crisis stuff? I mean, because like I know they don't have an animated.
They've never done a good Crisis on the Infinite Earth.
No.
Well, with Barry dying, you know, with him freaking
sacrificing himself. There was something that Barry was running and did. But did he stop? He was able to save himself. And I don't remember if that was in the Flash series or...
That was in Justice League. Yeah. Justice League. You find out that they thought that Brainiac had died, but he had really merged himself into Luthor. And he was utilizing Luthor to kind of rebuild himself. And so then you had a Brainiac-Luthor combo. And he was just like laying waste to the entire Justice League. And Barry's standing there, and he's kind of freaking out. And he turns around and he runs off. And so Brainiac's like, oh, he's a chicken. Okay, whatever. Turns around and starts like remaking some stuff. And then all of a sudden, Flash hits him, and he like blows back for a second. And it was Barry circling the Earth over
and over again.
Yeah. Was it the Infinite Mass Punch?
And finally, he landed and blasted him a whole bunch and tore all the Brainiac out of Luthor. And then while Barry's standing there, he starts phasing out of reality. And he's like, hey, guys, I feel funny. And then he started phasing out, and they had to reach into the Speed Force, and it took the whole Justice League banding together
to pull him back out. Well, and then one of my favorite comic runs was the Hard Traveling Heroes. Here we had DC heroes who were like gods, and Hal and Oliver's rich still at this point. He hasn't lost all of his money yet. And they start traveling the world. And every comic addressed civil rights, what was going on in the world, and it was grounded. These guys were they weren't fighting supervillains. They were fighting everything that affects hunger, drug abuse, all these things. And it was such a beautiful run. And it took them out of their superhero element and put them to where they had to, their powers didn't always save the day. They had to be more creative. And out of that came where Speedy, we find out he's a heroin addict.
He was
Roy
addicted.
Harper, yeah.
Yeah.
And just so much great stuff. And if you look at where we are today in society, you could literally do this story all over again and just have them traveling. But then go outside of the U.S. This was them traveling through the U.S. Do a whole movie where they decide to go off and then they come back, and they brought the heart to the Justice League. Because they were the ones who grounded everybody. Wonder Woman wasn't grounded. Superman is anything but grounded. Batman is not grounded. Martian Manhunter, none of those characters could have done what they did. I would like to see a full Spectre movie. Great horror. So you could do a great horror story. Give us a great Swamp Thing.
I mean, that's where Werewolf by Night, right? Werewolf by Night was so good, and I know that was live action, but it showed how there's definitely an untapped market to that style of comics, right? We've forgotten a lot of the more horror leaning elements of comics, and it would be great to see more of those done that way, right? I mean,
I'd love to see a return. Bring back Weird, which I think it was DC that did Weird War. It was all horror-based World War II stories. Which other ones? I mean, the House of Mystery and all those other ones. But that's a whole untapped area in these movies that you could be doing, and you would attract people who are into that.
So I have another topic once you finish your thought, Dad, and we're going to go in a different direction.
But it's like they just seem to want to focus on certain IPs, and they're getting old, and people are getting bored with them. So then they have to keep changing those IPs to attract in people, and they're changing them. Yeah. Once you start becoming stale with a character, let him retire for a while. Take him out of the limelight. Focus on some of your B-list characters and C-list characters. Make something out of them. And then you can bring back your other big hitters. Because every time we have to have something with a big hitter in it, we have to have a big villain. And then the risks are much higher. And then you start seeing all this collateral damage that they don't address in any way of, any fashion. It's like when Oliver in back to the first story, Green Lantern thing we were talking about, Oliver shoots his best friend in the back and kills him. And he's like, oh, damn it. Why'd you make me do that? No, that's not, no. That should have been the real big, that to save the next generation, Oliver had to kill somebody that he really loved, and that's going to scar you.
Yeah, make you step down.
That's a whole other story you could do where he's has to find his way back to becoming something. Remember when Spider-Man, when he went up against Kraven, and that one whole story arc, where the Kraven was going to kill Spider-Man, but he didn't want to kill him. He wanted to break him, and buries him alive. And Spider-Man has to come back, and Spider-Man fractures his mind. He's not the hero anymore, and then it's his whole fight to become back to who he was and rediscovering what was important. I was glad in the last Spider-Man movie we finally got the Uncle Ben moment for Peter. We still didn't get how he got his powers. Is he a mutant? Is that what they're going to do when they bring the mutants in? They're going to explain all the metas, instead of it being some kind of research and that.
Science.
I don't think you need to do an origin story, but it could have taken 2 seconds to have him showing him walking through a lab. Maybe he's there for an internship. He gets bit by the spider, gets sick, goes home. We see that he gains the spider powers, and boom, you go back to your story.
Yeah.
And you just kind of do it as a flashback moment.
And this is where the segue is going to come in. Remember, at the same time DC was doing their animated films and they were starting it, Marvel started theirs. And so it's like they didn't seem to have the same caliber as DC stuff. And
well, Lionsgate had the contract from Marvel to do the animation. All the same people were involved. The stories were being done out of one single studio. That wasn't what was happening in DC. No. DC was just hiring people and letting anybody do anything they wanted. And it wasn't until later on that they focused in on like 4 directors and the same person who was hiring all the people to do the voices and everything that you started to see it coalesce into something. Whereas Marvel did the Avengers Ultimates, which I hated the Ultimates line of Avengers. Their story was based in Ultimates 1 and 2, but then they decided to go off and do individuals because Iron Man had nothing to do. He was a total different Iron Man than the character Tony Stark that was appearing in Ultimates. Doctor Strange story, awesome. He had to go up against it's Marvel's version of Sandman, a nightmare, who was using the power of dreams in children to help with his invasion of the planet. Great introduction to Doctor Strange. Iron Man's first adventure was against Mandarin. It was a fantastic story. Yeah. And you had all these really good standalone stories that weren't interconnected. You had Planet Hulk. You had, all this other thing. And then Marvel switched and said, look, we want to start doing episodic TV shows to build an audience. So you see them cast aside the Marvel movies, except for like when they did the Howling Commando monster version. Some of those appeared on TV as specials, like the one where there was a Christmas one where Loki has to fight the frost giants, and so they still had standalone stuff, but their focus was telling episodic stories that went 4 or 5 seasons. Not to say that DC didn't do that. One of my favorite series was, since we're talking series and not movies right now, was The Batman. It was my favorite version of Batman, which the final season introduced the Justice League. And then while they had the Batman, they did something else earlier than that, which was Superboy and the Legion of Heroes. Unfortunately, it only went 2 seasons. But man, I've been waiting forever to see the Legionnaires in something. Mm-hmm. We were years from seeing them in live action. So to get the Legionnaires, if that was your fix, you had Superboy get drugged to the future. He meets a clone of him before he had become a clone because Death of Superman and all that hadn't been done yet. And you've got that whole thing that later when DC did one of their revamps, it was Supergirl who took Superboy's place. But I grew up with a Superboy. Most of you guys, Superboy never existed because it stopped at one point after Crisis. He never was. There was no Superboy, so you had to fill in the holes that he did with other characters. Supergirl went to the future to join the League and all these other elements.
Well, no, Superboy was just Connor.
Well, that was later on. He took Connor. Yeah, that's what. Like I said,
we didn't grow up with the Superboy. No, I grew up with the Superboy. He was just also a blend.
He was Connor. Yeah.
And he went around with the black shirt with the red S on it. Like that's the Connor. The stupid '90s.
Not
right?
Clark. It wasn't Clark in a teenage version of his adult.
Yeah, we grew up with the clone. Yeah.
Yeah, y'all grew up with the clone.
But
they took the storyline from World War III. Which was a great DC story series, which cost my favorite Aquaman version, the Harpoon Aquaman. He sacrificed himself. And but like with Crisis on the Infinite Earth, Supergirl was erased from existence, and she sacrificed herself. Barry ran himself to death to power the cannon that was going to take out Anti-Monitor. There was some heavy cost to what they were doing. It made it like, okay, heroes don't always win, and when they do win, there's a cost to it. And I think we need to go back to some of that in some of our storytelling.
Right.
Okay, and I'm done.
Well, okay, so back to where I was going with was
See, that's what. Wait a minute. Colin's been eating pickled chips, and now he's paying himself back for it, so he has to put on a mask.
Vince, I am your father. Come to the dark side, you knob.
Oh man! So
you could tell Darth Vader never dated after he became Vader, because no girl, you can't stay over to a girl's house and you're gonna go, I'm your baby's father, future father. You get out of my house.
Oh man! But so speaking of animated series, we had Spectacular Spider-Man, and that only went 2 seasons, and
it
fantastic.
Set up a 3rd season that was going to be so awesome, and then Marvel decided they wanted to go in a total different direction.
They want to do Ultimate Spider-Man, and then that wasn't like
Ultimate Spider-Man was good though.
It was
good. It was fantastic,
but it wasn't anything like the comics.
Was it worth it? Was it worth getting rid of Spectacular though?
I don't know. I can't say that. I loved Ultimate Spider-Man because it gave us younger versions of characters, and it introduced a lot of B characters and from the Marvel universe. We got to see the Thrasher and all these other characters. We had Cloak and Dagger. At that point, we hadn't seen Cloak and Dagger before. And you remember we had what was it, Amazing Spider-Man? Was it the 80s? Or was it just
Spider-Man
called
and
Spider-Man?
Amazing Friends?
Oh, in the 80s.
No, I'm talking about the one that gave us
the 90s. You're talking about, right?
The 80s one, yeah, that came out about the same time Hulk did, and the Fantastic Four and Silver Surfer.
That was in the 90s, Dad. That was the
90s.
Yeah, it was the 90s.
So that was called just Spider-Man. Right?
Just Spider-Man.
Just Spider-Man, and that gave us a bunch of characters, but we got to see Punisher finally. We got to see Blade. We got to see Morbius. But it seemed to focus way too much on like Smythe or whatever his name was. And all that stuff.
And
the Spider Slayers.
The Spider Slayers.
Yeah.
But Amazing took it off into a great place. Spectacular did. Because I used to collect the Spectacular Spider-Man. I had every issue until one day we were hurting and I found a collector who would pay me for every issue. And it was like handing me the money and I was like, trying to keep both at the same time to see if I could run out. And after it was gone, I started missing those stories, and I was like, man, I got to go back and rebuy all that stuff again. I never did. I just kind of gave up on it. But and then Ultimates Spider-Man was really good. I really liked it, and that led to Avengers and a whole bunch of other series. And then we had what's his name? Who plays Spider-Man now?
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland version, which went, I think, 3 seasons. And when they did the whole Doc Ock switching bodies with Peter and the Ultimate Spider-Man storyline and everything, I was like, it didn't have that weight to it, because you just knew it was not. They were going to figure a way to solve all the problems. And they did do the Venom seed, the whole thing where all the Venoms come and the symbiotes and take over New York, and all the heroes get them on them. I thought that was pretty well done. But and any cartoon that has Coulson in it as a principal of the high school is awesome.
Yeah. Well, we almost had the 80s style X-Men with the, prior to the X-Men as our TV series, but we ended up getting the Jim Lee style X-Men.
Yeah, but it was epic, man.
It was. And we're going to get that sequel series here soon at some point.
What's funny is that for me, my origins and experience with comics was totally different than your generation.
Mm-hmm.
where most of your experience came from watching the TV shows and being, um, not inundated. That's not the word I want to use, but for me, I had generations of comics in my head every time I was watching something. So I was like, "No, you got that wrong. This is how that was supposed to go." And then I remember, like when I had my shop and the kids would come in and they'd go, they would want to talk about X-Men. So then I'd be like telling them, and they go, "Oh, when did that happen?" And I was like, "Well, it was in this issue." "Oh, I don't read the comics. I only watch the show." And I had to shift my brain and go, "Okay, well that's from the TV show, but this is what happened in the comic." And they go, "Show me, show me." And then I go show them, and they go, "Okay, I want these." And I was like, "Wow." Reintroducing these kids to the history of stuff gets them buying it again. But if you're constantly revamping your stories like they do with animation, you're not finding an audience, and it's not generational. They like, you go to a con now, there are people like, "Well, I only like this part. I only want this story." But that story is just a small piece of anything. It was like, remember you were with me when the kid came up and I was talking to him and he had the Green Lantern shirt on. And I was like, "Oh man, you like Green Lantern?" And he was like, "Yeah, I love it." And I said, "So who's your favorite character?" And he was like, "What?" I said, "Well, who? Or do you like Hal, Kyle, Guy, John? Which one?" And he's like, "I don't know who any of those people are. I just like Green Lantern."
I like the one with the mask.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing is that you look at you can't do that today. You can't sit there and go, some kid comes in because they watched the cartoon and go, "Hey, well, here's this comic. You should check it out." Because the stories aren't going to relate. They're totally different.
And nobody has back issues anymore.
No.
Everything's going over to trade. And if you buy a trade, you miss certain things because they don't do a trade for everything.
No.
Only certain series get omnibuses, where you get the entire thing. But you were gonna introduce something in that segue, and you let me keep talking.
No, and that's what we did. We started going into it. It's just like I wanted to start talking about the Marvel side because we went really heavy into DC, and it's like there was a missed opportunity for Marvel really trying to tell some of their stories in an animated format.
Right.
But I think the Hellfire Club. Well, and they did do a version of that in the X-Men series.
Right. But if they were to do an animated movie based on the original John Byrne Claremont story.
You're Dark Phoenix is basically because up until
the ass end of it, I guess it'd be where Logan was down in the sewers and stuff like that, and they thought he was dead. He was the only one still.
And that is, in my mind, when you think, you see an image. When somebody says the name of a character, there's always an image in somebody's mind of what that character represents. To me, Wolverine is when he's climbing through the sewers and he comes out and he's like doing this, coming out of the filled water, and he takes out the Hellfire Club's minions, which are the faceless people with the slits in the eyes.
The blue suits with red hat. Yeah.
Yes. But I had to learn because when I started, the first X-Men comic I read was the one where they found the monolith, remember, on the estate, and it gets broke because somebody's angry and they hit it, and all those demon things start coming out, and they have to fight them. And at that point, I believe was because they readdressed it later on where Kitty Pryde had to fight him, where they attacked her at Christmas. But the original story was back when they had recently just been formed. I think Warpath was already dead, and it was before Jean had become. She was still Marvel Girl, and she hadn't become Phoenix yet. Because in her death, we got Wolverine when they fought on the moon. That's where Wolverine got the brown suit, which became my favorite suit of Wolverine. But it took me a long time to get to where I liked that yellow outfit on Logan, because I was like, if I was a sniper, I'd shoot right at the yellow. But being at Logan, you wouldn't matter because it wouldn't kill him. It just stood out like a sore thumb. I was like, man, he's supposed to be stealthy and he can get in and out and you'll never know he's there. I'm sorry, you know, you're contrasting with everything. I'm going to see you first of all. And then I
changed
love
the color palette.
But the brown fit him.
I know, did
better.
I know.
That hiding, he could blend into the shadows. I mean, they did so well with Nightcrawler because his basic colors were black, red. I always thought the white boots and the white gloves are going to make you kind of stand out, but I hated when they went all leather for a while. You know, they lost their individuality and all the things that just I really loved about the characters. I was never a big fan of the original X-Men suits, you know, blue movies. And yellow. Yeah. Well, not from the movie, but the original.
Yeah.
But after the movie did them in leather, then all that stuff started to come into the comics, and then I was like, oh, come on, please, hire a fashion designer.
Well, I mean, could you imagine us getting like a Secret Wars animated movie? Because we could have actually.
I want the old Secret Wars. Yeah. I don't want the new one. I want the original one.
Right. So that way you have like, you know, Peter getting his black suit through the machine that, you know, pulls the symbiote through the other universe and stuff, instead of it being this alien artifact from space. You know, would be nice.
Well, it was technically an alien artifact from space. The machine that they were using was supposed to generate material, and because Peter puts it on, and he's just, I'm really wishing that needing and longing is what drew the symbiote to him, you know, and then. But I love the fact that he didn't know that thing was on him. And then the whole run where at night when he'd fall asleep, the suit would take over his body and go have him running around. And there were people taking pictures of him fighting and doing things. He's like, I didn't do that. So for a while you were trying to figure out, is there somebody trying to, you know, is it Chameleon back? Is he trying to frame Peter? And then you find out that it's him. You know, he's got this living creature that's trying to bond with him. You know, so many great stories.
What Fantastic Four story would you like to see as an animated movie?
That's a good one. I love Annihilus.
Yeah.
I would want to do one where they're established and Sue is pregnant and Reed went into the negative zone because he needed to get the cosmic rod thing from Annihilus's neck, because it was the only thing that could contain Franklin's energy so he could have a normal birth, because he was going to rip Sue, blow her up. When he was born, she was going to die. And so have him, because that was one of my favorite, because that was Reed on his own fighting one of the baddest people in the galaxy, because Annihilus was no joke, and he was like up there with, you know, Galactus and some of the other villains they fought, and he's fighting to save not only save his wife and his child, but he's got to get back within a time limit, and he becomes just a little ruthless to get it done. I would like to see that kind of a story done. I'd also like to see the kids, Franklin being born, because Franklin to me is like the most powerful. I don't care who they say, but Franklin is the most powerful person in the Marvel universe. I mean, the kid can create anything with just a thought.
Yeah. And
without a source of energy. Even the Beyonder had to tap into his old universe. You know, Galactus had to eat planets to stay, and Franklin would be like, you know, and I would gravitate to the Chris Claremont and John Byrne stuff, because they wrote them and drew them so beautifully. If you remember, one of my favorite Fantastic Four ones was the the trial of Galactus, when Reed saved Galactus, and all the races in the universe put him on trial because he saved
the trial of Galactus.
Yeah, and you find out that Galactus has to exist, He's the only thing that keeps what happened to the original universe from happening again. Because remember, everything expanded and expanded and it blew up. Galactus is a creature of chaos, and he keeps constricting the universe, so there's this constant ebb and flow, and so they had to exist. So Reed actually saved everybody, but they were going to execute his butt for doing it, just because they saw Galactus as an enemy. But my favorite in the comic was when Franklin was watching TV as a 5-year-old, and there's a soap opera on that one of the because his mom walks out of the room, his sister's not born yet. Johnny messes with Ben. Ben goes chasing him off, and so Franklin's left in a room with the TV, and the character's fussing at somebody else, and it goes, "Why don't you just grow up?"
Oh yeah.
And there's that flash of light, and then all of a sudden the Fantastic Four are fighting against a villain that they have no hope of defeating, and it ends up being their son, because he was so successful. God, I hate when I get like this. Susceptible to that kind of influence. He did grow up, and it was his mom recognizing her son in him that figured everything out. Because Ben and Reed, and we're about to clobber, and he was going to kill them. He had no idea who he was. It was like all of his memories were gone. But that motherly instinct and his bond with his mother was what saved them.
Saved him.
And then there's the story with who was the guy that was from the Shi'ar? You can't defeat him. He had the mohawk.
Gladiator.
Gladiator. And you find out years later, he's not super strong. He's not powerful. His power is if you use a force against him, it goes right back to you. So whatever you're hitting him with, he's going to use against you. I was like, man, that is an awesome power.
Rubber band
punch
man,
me
huh?
in the, huh?
Rubber band man, huh?
Rubber band man.
So I know people are hit and miss about Thor, the movies and stuff. They're not a fan, so they like some, especially David doesn't like most of them. What story arc would you like to see animated for Thor that you think David would be?
When
okay.
Thor, when we find out the origin of Odin and his two brothers, the World Tree, and Thor is having to experience all this and seeing what happened to his father, and he gains a whole new feeling for his father. Because remember, early on, Thor and Odin fought all the time. He respected his dad. It was nothing like in the movies. That came much later. But you see, Thor has to experience what his dad went through to understand why his dad's the way he was. It's an old story. I like that one. I would like to see the one where we find out that the Asgardians even have their own gods above them, and there's a race of beings that are so high and elevated that they're the reason why Ragnarok happens, because they feed off of the pain and suffering and emotions of the Asgardians, and ever so many thousand years they wipe them out and then restart them over. And Thor gets angry. He's pissed. He's like, no freedom. We're your slaves. We're just marionettes, and you're playing us. We don't have any
autonomy or like self will.
Yeah, the self. I don't want to say control, but autonomy. They're everything they do, they think they're doing on their own, and it's like a play. It's like all of a sudden you find out that your whole life has been somebody typing your story on a piece of paper. You had no choice in what was going on, and he decides that's going to end. And so while Ragnarok is going on around him, he takes on these gods, and they go, "Oh, well, guess what? Come join us. We have a seat for you," because they realize that if he does and he's successful, other gods will know. Other species that they control are going to turn on him. So what do you do to an enemy? You invite them to become your friend. And Thor takes them out, and for the first time in that story arc, Asgardians are free to become and do who they want. And it changed the whole North how Norse mythology was handled in
The Marvel Universe.
in Marvel Universe. And then of course Thunderstrike. Thor getting so injured that he's got to his essence needs to be re-put into another human. And this time instead of a doctor, he's put into a construction worker, architect, you know. And Thor has to struggle because it's not Thor who comes out when he's using his hammer. It's the architect with Thor's powers. So Thor took a back seat there. There's just great stories that could be done. And I'm sorry, don't do all the comedy. I love, even in darkest times, we joke. Black humor, you know, if I'm on my deathbed, I'm gonna be cracking jokes. Because when I leave, I want to see people laugh. That's just how I handle things. And so there's a time and place. You know, when you're anxious or Spider-Man cracks jokes not because he wants to be funny. It's because how he deals with that tension.
Stress and tension, yeah.
Okay, so use that. Don't make it, whereas Ragnarok was perfect. Just the right amount of tension and dread and humor. Then you go to what should have been one of the darkest stories in Thor, and you make it into a straight-up comedy film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
sorry. Not even the screaming goats could save the film. And it took me understanding that this whole movie was not a movie. We don't even know if it exists in the Marvel Universe as a event that happens. At the end, it's a story being told to a bunch of kids from a guy who, I don't know, he's dead. Oh, he's dead.
A rock creature, like
the rock creature, yeah.
Or
he's carrying the little
I know,
insect friend.
Yeah. So, Dad, just to leave this for the audience, you used to tell us that you wanted us to get a laughing box whenever you passed and make sure that was in your casket.
In the casket.
Set off like right when the preacher is giving the
eulogy
of everything, and we're like, no.
It's like I wanted. George Carlin said it best. I want a 2-minute warning, so that when I know, I'm sitting there and I'm talking to a group of people or something, and I get this 2 minutes. 2 minutes, get your shit together, and you look at your clock and you time it and you say the most outlandish friggin' thing you can think of and go, "If I am lying, may God strike me dead." You will change people's lives.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, no, the person who said the most outlandish thing before dying was Socrates, right? I owe a man a chicken.
But I don't know if he said that on purpose or he was delusional at the time, because you're dying and you're not quite completely there.
I know what my last word would be. David.
Finland?
Finland!
Hey, we definitely, this is a callback, but we definitely know what Walt Disney's last word was.
That's right.
Elion!
What? No, it was Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell.
Different time, different strokes, different folks.
Get me Snake.
I think Elion grew up to be DeSantis, but I'm going in a different direction. Disney's going to come and haunt him. There's such great, rich stories in the lore, and I think that DC is missing the point because every 5 years they've had to reinvent themselves, and you can't survive reinventing yourself every 5 years.
No.
Marvel was starting to get there, but now Marvel's going back to that. Let's do the long story. We're going to do a long event that culminates a year or 2 years into this big epic. It ends, and then we fall back into our normal lives, and they keep going. And I think that's how life really works, and I think that is something, if Marvel can continue to do that, they'll continue to be successful. But there's a reason why anime and manga outsell, both the big two, Marvel and DC, and it's because they don't have anybody. The stories they tell are generational. They go back to some of their own culture and lore. All that's missing because we keep trying to say we don't want to talk about this in our history. So you can't have one thing that Ultimates did really well was take a Captain America who was from a period of time when there was racism, have him become a hero, gets woke up in the future, and he's still a racist. He's not a racist where he's going to hurt people, but he's a racist where he's used to seeing black people go into the back door at the right back there. He can't cope, and this whole world is so alien to him. It takes him a long, long time and a lot of good people to, to bring him
fix that. To overcome it, because you can't just take someone out of like the 50s and expect them to have like the same sensibilities that we have today. It's going to take them time. It's like our grandparents, my grandmother saying things and then her coming over it, becoming a better person.
You get to watch people grow and become better people for it. But if you're trying to eliminate that thing, they never learn, they never grow. Like in Ultimates, Thor was a scientist originally. And all of his stuff was technology. And then all of a sudden they introduced Loki because they're like, oh, this story isn't working. People aren't really digging the new Thor. So now we're going to make this guy who thinks he's Thor, but everybody else thinks he's a man who's crazy. But then Loki's going to show up and, okay, so he was not crazy. He was really Thor, but he was a different Thor. I was like, the early days of the Ultimates universe was really, really kind of sketchy. I mean, even Wolverine got killed in it. Cyclops just blew him to pieces because he was a jerk. And then, of course, he healed and grew back, and then he was like, you know what? Maybe I should try to be nicer to people.
So I think another thing that helps, right, with the manga storytelling is you don't have these stories that existed from 100 years, like these characters from 100 years ago that they're still, I mean, they exist, right? They're out there, but it's not the prominent story that's being told, right? Like My Hero Academia didn't exist when I was in high school when everyone was caring about.
But the archetypes are there. They're just
the archetypes are there, but whenever you're applying the archetypes to new faces and you can kind of set up, it might be similar. It's what's been talked about a million times before in a bunch of literary classes where there's only 9 stories, right? There's a finite number of stories that are actually told all throughout time, but it's how you dress them up. It's how you lead in and out of the various tropes and things within them. It's how you subvert this thing here, but then you lean into it over here, and all of that you're able to tell new and engaging. You're showing new and engaging ways to interact with this same story type, right? Because right. I mean, if it was it's all the same thing, then no one would have given a shit about no one would care about Naruto because I already saw the never-ending power-up struggle in Dragon Ball. Well, I wouldn't care about, the second Isekai anime because I watched Sword Art Online, right? It's like, yeah, the same things are there, but it's you do have these fresh new stories that roll in that have different tweaks, different twists to familiar tales that keeps them fresh.
Well, because you've got stories where a villain is not ashamed of being a villain. He's not, we don't have to give him a tragic life or a tragic history. They're just evil. And that's how things are, and you get that in that. But in our stuff, there's got to be a reason why somebody's that way. Lex Luthor, went from being a best friend of Superman and then trying to help him to overcome kryptonite. Then he became a villain. That was the basic story. After Crisis, he didn't know Superman. There was no Superboy. He was straight up a villain because he thought he was the best at they're going to do. And that is, to me, a good villain is the one who thinks they're the hero. And
Right.
they're not apologetic for what they're doing.
But part of the struggle is now you have those two variants, right? Now you do have these two variants of the same character. So someone who, like myself, comes into a series or a comic or a show through a show, right? I'm expecting a version of a character. And then I go into the comic or I go watch a movie, and now it's a completely different variant of that character, right? The awesome, I'm gonna beat their ass into the ground. I've got this badass hand, this chick that follows me around named Mercy that will also beat your ass into the ground and all this good stuff. And then you go read a different story, and Luthor's not that person. He's completely different. Mercy doesn't exist. You're looking around, you're like, what's going on? Whereas with manga, because you don't have this, oh, well, we've been telling the story, now we want to tell a different one, so we need to shake up everything and have the same characters, but apply new personality tropes and types to them. Instead of being able to do that, you are consistent with the characters until you hit the end point of your story, and then you can either, leave and revisit it in 20 years like Dragon Ball, or you can just leave and go tell a brand new story that you can dream up.
Like Boruto, which is almost identical to Naruto.
That's his son. And then actually they're going to be doing another series too. With
Well, more like Soul Eater, right? The guy who went and made Soul Eater told the whole story about the Soul Eaters, the Meisters, and all that. And then he turns around and makes Fire Force, which is nothing like Soul Eater, right? I mean, the art style is there and it's similar, but it's two completely different stories that have, maybe a character here and there that's sort of similar to, ones in each series, but they're completely different tales, completely different stories. And each one of them has this wonderful thing that Western comics seems to have forgotten, which is, a beginning, a middle, and an end to things. Because we hit the end and then, Batman dies fighting someone, and now Bruce is gone, and now we do a battle for the cowl, and now Dick is Batman, or no, Azrael's Batman, and then now Bruce is back, and then we go through it again, and then Batman's gone again, and then now Dick's Batman, and then he's gone again, and now Damian's Batman, and then it's like, okay, it just never ends.
As a devil's advocate, it's a never-ending story. But one thing is, like in My Hero Academia, we're watching these characters grow. We have a set point. They grow. They stagnate for a little bit. And sometimes you're like, you've already learned this lesson. Why you got to relearn it again? And then they get it and they grow. But the character growth plays along with their power growth. Whereas sometimes these characters just become more powerful, and it's all about the power instead of the maturity to handle and deal with it. Dick should never, ever, ever, pounding on the table, be Batman. He has spent his entire life trying to get out from under the shadow of Batman. And these people are like, he needs to become Batman. No, he doesn't. Why would he give up who he is to carry somebody else's baggage? Man, Damian can do that crap. We see the Hood become, stay the Hood. We see Tim become Red Robin. And they all are going off on their own arc. And then when they come and help Bruce, it's on their terms.
Sure.
And there's been a few times Bruce has told them to go do something, and they go off and do their own thing. And their idea was better than Bruce's. And it's because Bruce is wearing those blinders and he's seeing things through his own perspective, and he's not learning new things. So how you work with Bruce is you make him learn and see these things, and he has to grow as a person. Bruce, I always thought that Bruce should go from being this single-minded, psychologically damaged person to, okay, I'm a hero, but I'm still doing the same thing and nothing's changing. So I got to change, because Batman's only a tool. Bruce is the person. Bruce has to grow and figure out better ways of doing things. That was the argument that I was giving a friend of mine who was like, Bruce is an enabler. Bruce does nothing. We got Joker. We got all these people killing people all over again. And they're always escaping. The next thing they do, they kill a couple 100,000 people. Bruce is the killer because he's letting him live because he needs to have an excuse to stay who he is. And I was like, so you're telling me Bruce should become a killer? And he goes, oh yeah, man, I'd snap Joker's neck. I'd kill them all. And so then Bruce becomes them. So instead of growing as a character, Bruce is receding,
regressing,
and becoming this thing that he's hated his whole life. So for Bruce to grow, he should be able to exist without Batman.
Well, I think
he should be able to let other characters. Huh?
If Bruce did start murdering everyone, I think eventually his nose would begin to elongate, a red scarf would begin to manifest around his shoulders, and then he would change out the cowl to a fedora, and he'd just be the Shadow.
The Shadow. And I'm like, well, at that point, if I was Superman, I wouldn't go down and fight him. I'd just nuke him from orbit. Everybody's like, yeah, Bruce can beat Superman any day. No, if Superman really wanted to kill Bruce, he'd just go up, track him on the Earth, and these two little red beams would go right through his friggin' head or any other vital part of his body, and that would be the end of it.
Yeah. Or just quick zip him into space.
Well, I mean, considering the fact that, but at that moment, Superman isn't the Boy Scout he was either.
No, he wouldn't be. But I think Superman has done that. Superman killed he went to an alternate reality. He met a good Lex Luthor. There was a Supergirl there who was a protoplasmic thing, and he had to kill Zod and his two minions because they had wiped out all life on that planet, and they were coming to kill Lex, and who was a good guy in that, and kill the Supergirl version. And he as he was getting ready to confront them, he saw just the skulls and the bones and everything that was there, and he was like, he made the choice. I have to kill him. There's no way I can imprison them. There's nothing I can do to stop them. And he kills them straight up, wearing a suit, walks up to him, big old chunk of kryptonite, here, catch, they die. He goes back to Earth, and I'm like, man, this is not what should happen. This is, sure, he brought Supergirl here, so we have a new Supergirl to replace the one that's gone. But that's not Kal-El. He's somebody who likes to save, and he just murdered not only the last 3 survivors of his pseudo home, but in cold blood. And so what did they do in the story? They made him fracture. He became 2 personalities. And that's where Crime Buster came in, and then Superman. And then he started also losing his ability. Psychosomatically, he was shutting off his ability. They still existed, but he'd convinced himself that the world was better without a super-powered person. And he had to go off into deep space. He had to go off on his Ulysses journey to find his way back to who he was. There's a consequence when somebody steps over that line. And too often in comics now, they kill somebody and it's like, hey, let's go get a coffee. You want to go? Let's go eat some tacos somewhere. It's like nothing. There's no cost. And I truly believe we've lost something in our storytelling. But if you go and you watch things like, if you read things from manga, some of the manga stories, like the ones my grandson's always getting me to read, man, they've got it. They know these people suffer for the things that they do, but they realize they have to because they live in a world where it's kill or be killed. We don't have to have that in the DC universe because we have gods walking among us. The worst thing that can happen in DC is when the heroes become the villains.
Well, and then other thing too is something we talked about a little bit on the last episode was the fact that or I don't even know if we did or not, but you think about it. The whole thing with Superman, that's not his real identity. That's the costume. His real identity is Clark. Whereas Batman, yeah. Bruce Wayne is Batman. He is that vengeance. Batman. I mean, Bruce is the facade he plays. So I don't
Come
know.
on, other people.
Huh?
I talk too much, so I'm trying to get the others in.
Well, I mean, we can We can go into the top 5 if we want to go ahead and end the episode, or we can go a little further, just a little bit. It's up to Colin.
It's a rough day.
It's all right. I know.
Yeah,
he said chips.
Okay then.
I thought you said a different word, so I was trying to cover for you.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do our top 5. I think we covered this topic fairly well.
Well, you grew up reading the same comics I did. I mean, you got to have something.
No, I mean, when it comes to the animated movies, it's very few of them I actually invest myself in. The rest of them is, for me, it's all popcorn type stuff. I'm just happy to have something. I'm just grateful that there's, it's like I was happy when Gotham by Gaslight came out. One of my favorite stories. I was livid when Killing Joke came out because of that whole subplot with him and Batgirl.
Yeah, which never.
Somebody needs to be nailed to the cross for that one. Things like that. But no, over the years I've learned to focus on just a couple of characters that I like.
But as a creator, you used to write and draw your own comics.
I still do.
And so, what are some of the things that you try to
Well, it was, I did stuff with consequences and stuff like that, but there was always, I always tried to keep a balance in my characters and stuff. Like if I created a character, I would create another character to counter that. One requiring the other and stuff like that. Or, if you remember, several of my characters were actually just people, just doing stuff. That, the realistic approach, the grounded approach. I let you and Mark and the others create the fancy characters. I had 2 or 3 characters that were just, up there in level and stuff like that, and the rest of my characters were just, like Troubleshooter and Smith and Wesson.
Oh, and then
and Badge.
What was the character that I can't remember what you originally called him? The one that we took and made Givens.
Alterator?
Alterator. Because I knew him. I really enjoyed the Alterator stuff that you had done and the things we talked about.
Right.
And it was natural for me to take him and extrapolate him out to being an older person. Almost like Bruce was in Batman Beyond. You know? And what happens when he becomes a person who thinks he's on the right side, and they're doing things because humanity and everything has collapsed, and yet he's compromised himself. Where does his breaking point come? When does he decide enough is enough? I've already compromised myself so much. This is my line. Because he did a lot of stuff for Swaj, and he always thought he was doing the right thing. But when these young people come in just trying to save one of their friends and realize that Swaj wanted to capture them, manipulate them, and use them to create other soldiers, he was like, this has got to, I'm putting it down. And then there was this whole ideology argument between Swaj of the ends justify the means, and Givens, this can't be. You have to have a line that you won't cross, and you've crossed it, and I cannot work with you anymore. And then he's got to argue with a bunch of individual kids and young people who are so into doing their own thing of their own mind, and he's like got to teach them that to survive in this world, there's safety in numbers, and that you're gonna have to work as a team, because he remembers the teams that he had, and so he becomes the mentor to all these characters while trying to instill in them certain ethics that might not exist anymore. He's trying to tease like the old samurai teaching the new samurai to step up and become the next protectors, or like the Roman centurions. It just seemed a natural fit, and I wanted to do honor for that character. I hope that you didn't mind it and that you thought what we did was good.
I liked it. I mean, it was definitely a different take on it. Mine was just more of a straightforward,
superhero.
With the two brothers had entirely different upbringings, and Bandolier always was, the guinea pig, and always ended up in different phases and stuff because of the experimentation he was willing to run himself through. Relied on powers at one point, relied on technology at another point, and then Alterator was, more of the Eastern philosophy and stuff like that, and then more of the code. So they kind of balance each other out. I don't know. That was ages ago.
Well, I think we try to leave a little piece of ourself with everybody. That's how we remember. But
I don't know. If I had to say which character I left a little piece of me was with Badge. That was above all else. That was the one I went and created a whole, that Vandalier was his father, and then I created his father, who was actually just an occult detective who ended up getting part of a ritual and made him live into his 120s before he passed away and stuff like that. So I had this whole trilogy spawning.
There's a generational lineage.
Yep.
And
each one was different.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what you get with Easter storytelling, like with manga and Japanese
Yeah.
animation. I mean, you get that. You don't have people clinging to the character so much that it's like he's a 80-year-old man still jumping around Gotham City. Oh no, I broke a hip. Today we found Bruce Wayne dead in an alley with a Batman costume on.
He shoots the gun, goes to swing, and pulls his arm out of socket, and he's just hanging there.
Oh, jeez. And that's the sad thing is, like, the Flash got a chance to change mantles multiple times. Of course they brought Barry back and everything, but we had Barry, we had Bart Allen, we had even
Wally.
Hey, it went Barry then Wally.
Wally, yeah.
Well,
I was going to correct him.
I'm sorry. Look, I'm just naming because I want.
David was about to jump through that screen.
And I'm a big Flash fan too. But the thing is like, because I was even going to mention Jerry Garrigan also, because he was the first speedster.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have like these characters that got to pass the torch. Martian Manhunter, that's a whole different thing. I think he has a daughter, right, in the comics.
Well, she's not his daughter, but she's like a cousin.
Yeah. Oh, he's a cousin. It's like Clark with his cousin, huh?
Yeah.
Well, it's actually like she's a completely different race of Martian, if I remember.
Well,
right,
at first, now she is. Like, see, that's the thing is, like, originally she wasn't a white Martian.
Right.
And as the story goes, you get different writers, and all of a sudden they change something up, and then people are like, well, she's always been this. Well, no. As of this, this is the new continuity. But in the old continuity, she wasn't. And the relationship changed. This one, changed how John Johns reacted to, because originally the old John Johns would have just wiped out any white Martian that he'd seen. He'd have killed her, in a heartbeat. But being around humans, it changed him. Because if you remember, he was a lot like Spectre in the beginning. He disguised himself as a cop, just like Spectre disguised himself as Kerrigan, his original person, and then and then like with Deadman, I love that there was this whole segment of DC where characters were met a tragic demise or something tragic happened in her life, and Deadpool's whole thing was, I mean, not Deadpool, I can't believe I said that. Deadman's whole thing was
See?
he would be drawn to where something tragic was going to happen, and he would go in and possess different individuals to try to stop whatever was coming. You had John Johns was really a police story, whereas he was, a detective, always saying, and he would revert into his powers when he needed to. And then you had Spectre, who was really the god of the, not god, the spirit of vengeance. That's how they played him up. He wasn't like a spirit of justice or of an angel. If you remember, he killed people. Every book, every story, and he died similar to the way the crimes that you did. You killed somebody with a pair of scissors, a giant pair of scissors are going to come and cut you in half. You drown somebody, tidal wave's going to take you out. His was always that poetic justice.
That's what made the DC short so good, was that they played up into all that. It was great.
Yep.
Not to go off on a complete tangent, but the character who a mantle was passed to, that got screwed over the hardest by all of DC that I can think of off the top of my head, is Garth, Aquaboy, the original one.
The original, yeah.
It was the Violet Eyes, right? He was the one who was cursed to doom Atlantis. He was this amazing magic user. He could manipulate the waters, all that stuff. And I remember this because this is the one sin that I do hold against Blackest Night. You had all these different tie-in stories that were going on, and Garth finally received acceptance from the people of Atlantis, took the throne because Arthur was dead at the time. Took the throne of Atlantis in one of the Teen Titans tie-in books to Blackest Night, and literally the very next issue, he gets killed. I was like, that's some dirty shit, DC. Come on now. And then he got replaced, and he's been gone. It seems like ever since. So
well, it was wasn't Whitest what was the white
Brightest Day?
The Brightest Day was where they introduced brought Aquaman back for a short period of time, and then he met Manta's son and all that other stuff, and he became the new Aqualad for a while.
Yep. Garth is a long distant memory, sadly.
But unless, there were a lot of offshoot stories of, like, how the original king, one of the original kings of Atlantis was a wizard. And so there was a 12-issue story all about him and the mysticism and the magic of what eventually would become Atlantis. And then they just tied up that story in Young Justice, where they brought that character back. And they did it was a great throwback to the whole story arc in the Aquaman comics and that original miniseries. Like Amethyst was another offshoot story. There was the comic Weird, where it was based in the DC, but there was something wrong with the guy. He was like a hero, but he finds out he's actually dead and was brought back. And it was only a short run. Well, they brought him back in another thing not too long ago. And I was like, wow, somebody has got some lore here in their mind where they've read these and they're like, you know what, we haven't used, let's go back and pull this out. And that's a treasure to me when I see them pull something, out of the storeroom and let's give it a fresh new paint and then run it around. What bothered me about Garth is they could have gone in a total different direction for him. And then they brought back, they decided to bring back Arthur, Aquaman, and what do? They give him the Atlantic, King Arthur's story, and his hand is now made of water, and it's the new Excalibur, and he's re-resurrected by the Lady of the Lake. And I was like, okay, this ain't gonna work, and it didn't. If it's too different, the audience isn't gonna buy into it. It was just such a drastic return, and when the characters returned, man, it was beautifully drawn, and I loved it, but it just wasn't Arthur, it wasn't Aquaman, and it didn't fit in to the years and years and years of continuity that they've built up.
Right.
Yeah.
There's lots of characters who got bum steers, man, in some of the comics.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked me, this has got me going down that yellow brick road of memories. I want to see a good Captain Marvel animated film, and I don't want it to be her. I don't want it to be Carol's story.
Marvel.
I want it to be Marvel. I want it to go all the way up until the, and you could do it like a story where he comes in, saves Earth, becomes Earth's guardian. He becomes, because the Kree weren't really emotional and empathetic. He was, because they used, if I remember right in the stories, to help him look like everybody else, he had to take this stuff, and it was genetically altering him to make him appear human. If he had a medical exam, he would look human, and that changing to him is what made him become something different than what he was. And then he turned on his own people to protect his new home, and then jump him through his life. If you look at like how they did Beowulf, it's only stories of certain points in his life. It's not his entire life story. Jumps from when he's young to when he goes and helps fight Grendel and her mother, and it jumps to him as a king. What is that?
Magic.
This is my wallet.
Magic.
Your wallet came back.
I literally just pulled this out of my ass.
You might want to wash that.
Gotcha.
It's a whole new way to refer to a prison wallet.
Yeah. Here, let me make some change for you.
Down the rails we go. All right.
And you could do that with Marvel, and it end with him dying of cancer.
Yeah.
All the heroes trying to save him, and it just go to show. The one thing I always took home with Superman was, in spite of all his power and his strength, his intelligence, he couldn't save his dad from a simple thing like a heart attack. And that carried him with him throughout his entire life. Peter Parker, he is responsible for the death of his uncle. His uncle was trying to teach him integrity, and that when you have power and strength to help people, help them, that with that extra power comes greater responsibility. You're not going to go to somebody who's poor and expect them to save everybody when a rich man gets to sit at home and live a life of luxury. When you have a lot, you have to give back more. And so that was Peter's curse. It's kind of like a curse, but it's a gift in the end.
Are you trying to
Peter
lay the
carried
golden
that.
egg real quick? Oh.
Huh?
I was like, Colin was just tapping his belly. I'm like, are you trying to lay the golden egg since your wallet appeared?
I think he's being attacked by a Wookiee. I mean, a baby Wookiee, or what is? No, it's an Ewok.
The monster.
Oh, hello there,
Monster puppy.
Yoda. Man, you need to get some electrolysis. Colin's like, how dare you? But
no, this is my buddy. So yeah, let's do this. Let's do these lists.
Let's do the list.
Let's wrap this up.
All right, everyone, we're gonna do the top 5. Basically, our top 5 animated
Comic
book movie and film adaptations. Yeah. So, who wants to go first?
I'll go
let
first.
David.
Let David.
What?
I want to hear David's.
Yeah.
Because then if I have to, I can adjust mine.
So are we going all 5 at one time, or
we'll do the round?
We're doing round robin. Okay.
So number 5.
So yeah, I was horrible and I didn't make a list before coming in here, but I said I would make it up as I go. So just off the top of my head, the first one that pops in is one that gets a little bit more love these days, but I felt was a little bit underappreciated, but it's pretty damn good. Was the CG film of the Turtles? Was pretty solid. I enjoyed that one quite a bit. And
I thought it was a great story because it had some elements in it that we've never seen in any other turtle story.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a departure, but they did a good job of it. And the fight between Raph and Leo is always a fun one to have.
Well, also it's connected to the original movies.
And the original comic, because remember when Roth got tired of everything and decided to go off and be his own vigilante, and so we got to see that. And
Cool.
of course, it had Patrick Stewart in it. Man, come on.
Well, that's only because we couldn't get Sean Connery to do the voice of the main character because he wasn't acting anymore.
Did he really ever act? Or is he just Sean Connery in every role?
Movie? So you're talking about Sean Connery's like what, the Michael
He's-
Madsen in every movie?
Well, yeah, Michael Madsen and John Wayne, they're all
the same
the
character.
same. Bruce Willis. Have you seen the list of Bruce Willis movies? He's like got 500,000 of them he made in like 4 years, and it's just like the same character that just kept walking him from one set to the next.
It's John McClane as a war soldier. It's John McClane as this. It's John McClane as Joe Colton from G.I. Joe.
It's John McClane is a guy who can't be hurt.
There's one where his son, they're mobsters, and his son goes overboard, hurts somebody, and the guy is an ex-soldier, and he gets angry, so he starts dinking with him. So then they try to kill him. So he's like, "You got to take him out. You got to get rid of him. He's got to die. You can't play with this guy." And so every time the son goes out to do something, the guy turns it on him, and it's got the guy who played Punisher in it.
John Bernthal?
Which one?
John Bernthal, not the new one, or Thomas Jane.
Thomas Jane, yeah. And he's an old burned out soldier who sells weapons. So they hook up and they start taking him out. And they at one part you can tell like Bruce Willis is so done with the filming. They have him like sitting in a chair like this, and the guy sneaks in and he's like, "Where's my son?" And he goes, "I'll get to him in a minute." He goes, "Well, whatever you would do, get it over with." He's all this. And then the guy just walks up and he's like, "Come on, do it." And the guy shoots him in the head. There you go. There's Bruce Willis is out of the picture now. And then it became a really big action flick. And I was like, wow. I can't see it, David.
Oh, I was just trying to show that we're down a rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah. No, I was going to end it.
All right, Dad. You go next with yours.
You really want me to go down this rabbit hole?
Well, then I'll go next, all right? So my number 5 is Batman the Killing Joke. Because we got to have both Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy come back to do the voices, and I thought it was really good. And I enjoy that comic a lot.
Yeah. All right, I'll go next.
Except that Bruce knocked up his son's girlfriend.
The Killing Joke?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the
Him
movie.
and Barbara.
Yeah, there's a whole half an hour of this.
Yeah, we'll just ignore that.
We'll just ignore that.
Moving on.
Yeah, moving on.
All right, I'll do my number 5. My number 5 is the first Ultimate Avengers movie, where Cap got thawed and the Hulk was the villain for a good chunk of it, and then they fought the Chitauri. Loved that. I thought it highlighted Captain America quite well, who is one of my favorite Marvel characters. So.
I want to say something. I was going to say, there's something I want to say about that. If they were going to do that and they were going to do the Ultimates, they should have had what the Hulk did to the other guy in the movie. I mean, in the original comic.
See, we're going back into this rabbit hole here.
No, I ain't going to go there. I was just saying that.
It was somebody else's rabbit hole.
He went into somebody's rabbit hole.
All right.
Spawn. It was
the TV series
for its time. The TV series, and I know that's not what we're supposed to be doing, a movie, but it was really just one long story.
Yes.
To me, it felt like it was a movie instead of a TV series, but it doesn't fit into our thing. So let me, I'm gonna say heavy metal.
That one's for you, Jeff, if you're ever watching.
Some of the first things I picked up and working in comic shops, because I couldn't buy heavy metal at the time, and one of the shops that I would frequent had a bunch of them on a rack, and I started reading them, and I fell in love with them. You know, the and there's just stuff that I'd never been exposed to. There was types of stories and science fiction and everything else in them. You know, a lot of boobs, man, and I'll admit that. A lot of tentacles. So it was, you know, my first introduction to what would eventually become Asian stuff. But I'm just pushing this off right into that rabbit hole. Okay, I'm done.
Well, you could have talked about the fact that it had a fantastic soundtrack, and one of the
well, I was
and,
talking more about
and one of the best shorts. I mean, the film things on that is the bomber with the guy who got to.
Well, and what is that from? That is
the original story for Gremlins.
Dan O'Bannon wrote that Aliens, story for Alien.
Yeah,
that is what saved when they were trying to figure out and write Alien. They were sitting there. They were looking at different stories that they loved throughout their life. They had figured out that, you know, they wanted the alien on board the ship. They wanted to, you know, Shusitz had the bad dream, and he goes, you know, it rapes the guy by the mouth, and he's like, yeah, that's it. And then they were like, okay, but so then where's the rest of the story? And he goes, why don't we just bring in your B-17 bomber story, where the crew of a bomber trying to get home after a bombing run are attacked by gremlins. And so it all started to come together. And when I first saw the heavy metal in the theater, when I got to the bomber part and the zombie thing, and I was like, I know what that's from. And, you know, everybody's like, shh. I was like, but it's fantastic, because I'd only read it as a script in script form. And that was a beautiful visual to it. You know, the soundtrack was fantastic. The Tarna story was great. I read some of the stuff about Harry Cannon, so that cab thing was fantastic. I mean, it just had that feeling of, the only thing that was missing from that movie was like when you pick up a magazine and you smell the paper and the ink and it's printed on. It's like walking into an old movie theater where it smells like burnt popcorn or popcorn and soda that's been spilled. That movie had everything but the smell, but the soundtrack made up for it. I was like, I feel like I'm actually reading one of the old magazines. And I was just missing the tactile part of it. But yeah, I can't tell you how many times I went and saw that movie at the theaters. And found new ways to experience it.
Anyway,
so
David.
That's fine. So next one in line for me. Again, none of these are in any particular order. I would say Justice League: The New Frontier. Right. It was it's a great little comic that they turned into a great little movie. It's two movies. Cool. Huh?
It was two movies, I thought.
Nope.
Because I know it was two books.
Yeah.
One.
Just one movie. Okay. It was just cool seeing all the older designs of the characters, right? Showing kind of the origins of some of them, like Manhunter and Lantern in it, and getting to see kind of like them growing into and then discovering this whole almost eldritch evil that's springing upon them, right? With the giant weird ball, like planet that's coming at them from the center of the earth or whatever it was that had the dinosaurs. It was nuts, and it was great, and it was filled with fantastic references and pulp, and it was just a ton of fun.
Yeah, I love the fact that they play up on it's the and Superman, was it Superman went to Atlantis when he got knocked into the water? That's where Aquaman came from. But the Island of the Dinosaurs, that was from the old World War II comics, where the guys got shot down on the island, and that island was that.
It had the Blackhawks in it. I mean, again, there were references everywhere throughout that entire movie, and I mean, it was a lot of really great little cameos inside of an overall really entertaining story.
And it was a throwback to the old Justice Society version of instead of the Justice League. It was every character was a throwback.
Well, it was a little bit of a mix of both, because like Flash was Barry, Green Lantern was Hal, right? It wasn't Alan, it wasn't Jay.
No.
But the design of the characters, yeah, like the design of Wonder Woman was more JSA, Superman was more J. It was a cool interbreeding of the history of DC up to that point.
Right.
So my number 4.
Do you have those? No, I'm just asking.
The New Frontier, the books?
Yeah, both of them. Oh, I have them as 2 books.
I have the. I went and I got the Absolute edition of it.
You got okay. Yeah. When I bought it, I bought the first one, and then when the second one came out, I bought it. The second one. I didn't know they had done a full compilation of them. Yeah. That was my first experience with it before they ever did the anime. So I was really excited. I remember trying to get these guys to watch it with me when it was coming out.
It was good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was already dead. Me and Anna were living off of 1960 when it came out.
But I kept calling everybody. Yeah. And I tried to get Ember to sit down and watch it with me, and nobody was, watch the damn movie.
So for me, number 4 is going to be The Adventures of Tintin. I love that setting. I loved the little comic and stuff back in the day, and I thought the animation was good. It was just kind of just one of those, to me, really well put together movies. I just lost myself in it, and kind of in like the 1930s and 40s adventure story.
Right. Tintin is, even the television series has been pretty faithful to the book. Mm. It's been consistent regardless of who's at the helm. They get people together who know and understand and love the source material. And I've never seen anything Tintin that was disappointing. So when that movie came out, I was thoroughly enjoyed with it. I did thoroughly enjoy that.
It was a bit aggravating when Tintin wasn't put in a book yet. You had to pick him up on Sunday in the Sunday paper when you had to steal the comic section from your parents while they were reading the paper. And then you got maybe 4 panels, up to 6 panels. And then you had to wait a whole week for the next story. And then you get it, and it would still be 2 frames of it would be what you had saw in the last time. So you're like, it was kind of like watching a Dragon Ball Z fight where
last time
it's only 15 it's only 15 minutes of new footage.
Yeah. All right, Colin.
Guess it's me.
All right.
Let's call it.
The remaining ones all have a tying theme character. Number 4 is Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. Okay. And the reason of all of these is going to be because of Constantine. Love me some Matt Ryan Constantine.
Mm-hmm.
And as time got on, the writing for him, animated wise, got better and better. So,
what kind of killed me about that was it was just another Flashpoint story.
Yeah, but the thing is, it was Constantine who convinced him to do it.
Right. Well,
in character.
Yeah, in character. But if you read The House of Mystery, or there were 2 Constantine. The one with the Demon City where he was in
We'll get there.
And then the other one that was The House of Mystery, which tells you what happens after Constantine disappears.
Right.
And that broke my heart because I was like, man, knowing how they treat characters, we may never see him again. Because at the time they were trying to recast him and all this other stuff for the new movie. It's like, he's Constantine. You can't change him. He is.
He is the manifestation of that character.
Yeah, mm-hmm. There are certain people who are born to play a role, and he is definitely that person.
Yeah.
Especially if you read Hellblazer and all, all that stuff. So, I'm gonna go with Iron Man, one of I think it was the 3rd or 4th of the Marvel films, animated films. And only because I had been dying to see, it had Rudy, it was Tony at his best, and doing something without thinking about the consequences. What could be wrong with resurrecting an ancient city that has been buried underground for eons for a reason? No, Tony, you can do it, so why not? And then that it was all a Mandarin story, and I love Mandarin, and we'd not seen a decent version of Mandarin ever, and they nailed him perfect for that. I watched that movie. I had to buy that thing twice because how much I watched it, and it's still in my room. I mean, it's one of my collection, and and I don't know if we'd have had an Iron Man if it hadn't been for that.
For those
because I think they figured out how to do an Iron Man story through that, working on that one.
Well, I think having Favreau be the one who wrote the story, directed it, and everything for his love for the series,
Well, it goes back to what Colin said, and David, you got to have somebody who loves and understands the history and the character to tell the story about him. You can't take somebody who, I hate Star Wars, I never watched Star Wars, I can't stand Star Wars. Oh, you want me to direct a Star Wars film? Sure, I do.
I mean, that's what we found about Witcher, right? And Cavill, that's the craziest thing, right? Is one of the hardest things to find right now is to find enough people that are passionate about a project to really sink their teeth into and make it great. And Cavill is a huge Witcher nerd. And the fact that you had that there, a guy who's that big into the source material, clearly has the chops and the ability and the build and everything to play that character, and the writers you put on it are people who apparently despise the product. It's like, how you're just asking for it to fail at that point.
Well, and he was on the set, and he would, when he'd get the scripts, he was an advocate for getting things changed and fixed.
Yeah.
We've got one more season of him, and then Hemsworth, he's supposedly as big a fan as Cavill was. Again, I've seen him interview, and the first thing that he did was he tested him, asking him questions or hinting at things, and go, oh no, that, and he intentionally said things wrong to see if he'd be corrected. And so if he feels comfortable with Hemsworth coming in, I think it'll be good. It's just going to be awkward to see them because they don't look alike.
No, not even close. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I mean, it goes to that, right? Like that you do need a good, solid team that actually cares about what they're doing, and because it shows on the screen, right? If you don't care, then you're going to miss the small things that the fans want to see.
That was why Halo failed, man. I'm sorry, I didn't like it.
And part of the other problem is that we have no patience. If it ain't right, they'll lose the audience quick, and then audiences will form a campaign to get it taken off and fire everybody and all that. So we like with the Beasts, the other Harry Potter, there were 2 more films in that. We're never going to get them. They're never going to complete the story. The last one had such an uproar because of, obviously, the people who read the stories didn't understand that Dumbledore was gay. And so they perceived something. And so when it was really portrayed in the film that way, and his love for Griswold, was it Griswold? I can't remember what the other wizard's name was.
Grindelwald.
Grindelwald. It turned everybody off, so now we're not going to get it. It's and I'm guilty of it too.
It was the Johnny Depp stuff. It was mainly the Johnny Depp stuff. The fact that they're not going to cast him back as the villain.
No, but they'll offer him back Pirates of the Caribbean and other things.
Well, that's Disney versus.
I know it's different, but I think
that third movie died because you went from Depp not being in it anymore to all of a sudden it being Mads Mikkelsen, right? And then all of the weirdness that was going around Depp in that movie, and all the super Depp fans were pissed off that he got recast, and so they weren't going to go see it, and that was a huge draw at that point because he's going to drive people to movies like that. So he had all the people that specifically turned away from it for that point They're the people that turned away from it from the point that you brought up. It was just that movie. The second Depp was cast out of it, was gonna fail. Period.
But the story wasn't bad.
Sure,
it was just people were mad about other things, and then they like I was saying, I did the same thing. I'm a huge Cowboy Bebop fan. The first few episodes I watched of Cowboy Bebop, and I hated it. I was like, this is not Cowboy Bebop. I got through it, and I was like, and then it was too late. It was already canceled. I was like, man, I could see another couple of seasons in this. It will become Bebop. There were the seeds of it there. Now we ain't going to get it. And when we fail in a film, it can be 10, 20 years before you get a second shot at it. And we see that way too often in other things. But then you have fans who are so fickle that they wanted to get rid of what's his name, the director for Suicide Squad, the last one,
Gunn?
James Gunn?
Yeah, James Gunn. Because of comments he'd made 10 years ago, he was,
that was during Guardians 2, not Suicide Squad.
But what I just used that as an example.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember the name, so I was trying to throw something out to make me remember. And he was fired from Marvel. Then he goes over and DC's like, you know what? We're in such bad shape. We're willing to give you a shot.
Yeah, we're gonna let you completely take over the DC universe now.
And well, no. Remember, he did a movie for it and made money.
Yeah.
Then he did a TV show for Peacemaker, and that made him money. So now he's going to be the guiding force behind it. But there was talk that he was never going to work again. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was going to give him a shot or anything. And and the same audience who hated him 5 seconds ago were loving him because what he did with DC. We've got to give movies they have to carry themselves on their own merit. You have to move away from the politics and who a person is and judge their work just for the work, because we don't get things just because people don't like somebody or because they said the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that we have to deal with in our society now. But David,
I'm now lost. My turn?
Yes, it's your turn.
Okay. I'll make it quick and easy. Batman Beyond: The Return of the Joker, right? I mean, Batman Beyond itself was a fantastic sequel to the old animated series, right? It was an interesting way to see the growth of the character and Batman passing on a mantle to someone who wasn't Dick or Damian, who didn't exist at the time, and all that goodness. And then getting to see that whole, spiral of Tim and turning into the Joker and all that good stuff. It was just, Batman Beyond was great, and the movie was great. And so
let's screw over Tim Drake.
Hey,
again.
Tim gets no love except every now and then. But yeah, I mean,
the only detective, other greater detective than Batman and Sherlock Holmes, and they did that. I loved them. I loved it. But I was happy that they brought Tim in. I was looking forward to him, and then we get that. And I was like,
So yeah, because I mean, keep in mind too, we had two versions of that movie. We had the TV edit version that got released in theaters, and we had the uncut that only came out on VHS DVD at the time.
DVD, yeah.
And that gave us more depth on what was going on and made it a bunch.
I think it was VHS because I still have it, wasn't it?
It might have been.
No, I think I've got the
have it on
DVD version. Yeah. Because I know I had the Phantasm. I still have the Mask of the Phantasm, and that's VHS.
Okay, sorry. My buddy Mike was saying, he said that Peacemaker was better than he thought it would be. He hated the character in the movie, but loved him in the show. So I was just mentioning that I can understand that. A show gives a character a chance to spread his wings and grow as a character that you have time to flesh him out.
But
and the fact that they brought Vigilante, who was like one of my favorite characters back in the day, in. I didn't like all of how they portrayed him, but it was pretty friggin' exciting to see him,
So for my number 3 is, now keep in mind that what I'm about to say, yes, there was a cartoon, but there was a comic that came out before that cartoon. And my number 3 is G.I. Joe Resolute. Fantastic film. Kind of it was a more serious tone than the cartoon. It actually kind of ended G.I. Joe and Cobra's battle against each other. It gave us the whole. I really hated the whole thing of Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes fighting each other, but because in the comic they're not like that. They're not enemies. But yes, the original comic came out before the cartoon, so it is a comic book cartoon.
Mic drop. All right, David. Right?
What? No, it's you, Colin.
No, it's you. It's you.
Okay, number 3, Justice League Dark.
Obviously, for all the reasons we've already discussed.
But they touched on a couple of classic Constantine moments throughout it, like the poker game and stuff like that, and touching on the deals and everything like that he made. But it was really good to see characters like Black Orchid, and Etrigan, stuff like that.
Oh, the demon.
Yeah. I mean, it was really go top off this just Constantine basically pointing him as a missile toward the in the final battle. That a lot of good stuff going on there.
Mm-hmm. Would have liked to have seen just a Jason Blood story of him and Etrigan.
Could still happen.
Just hope so.
I mean, that was one of the other things about Justice League Dark that I did like, is that it did cover a fair amount. If I remember right, it started off with Jason Blood. I mean, after the poker thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or some one of the other, and it kept touching back to it, and it ended with them burying Jason in his homeland, and then the invitation was extended for the JLA. So they basically intertwined Jason Blood's story with it. But yeah, I would like to see a movie of Jason Blood, Etrigan type of thing. Go into a little bit more detail with it. But it's still a really solid movie, and I watch it a lot. Not to mention it came with a Constantine figure.
Yeah, that is true. It did.
I used to love buying the movies, and they came with the little extra figure in it. And I've got like a shelf full of them in there. Like I got 4. I think they did 2 or 3. Yeah, there were 2 different Wonder Womans. There was 2 Catwomans. There was the Flash. There was I believe there was a Sinestro one. I don't remember which one that is for, but I have them. I've got 2 different Hals, and they're all die-cast little figurines that used to come in a box. I guess I'm next, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go. I don't want to stick with just Marvel, but World War Hulk, it was World War Hulk, or what is it, Hulk World, or whatever they called it.
Planet Hulk.
Planet Hulk. I thought it was a great, because we don't give very much Hulk being the Hulk, it was, and the whole tragedy of finding his place and making a home for himself and finding a love for the Hulk, and because Hulk has had several loves in the comics, and every one of them has not worked out for him. And I mean, hell, his own true love died from radiation poisoning because she was with him. And I knew that was such an epic story that we were never going to get it in a live action. Now we may. but I really did miss Silver Surfer being it. Was it Silver Surfer? I can't remember, because in the comic, I believe it's Surfer he fights. In the anime, it was Beta Ray Bill they put in, right?
I think so,
if I remember right. And I just missed that where he fights them, because if I remember right, Silver Surfer had they captured him and put that thing on him that they put on everybody that would blow up, and that's how they kept their slaves in order. And seeing Hulk as a gladiator, and I love old gladiator films. The Gladiator with Russell Crowe is one of my favorites. And just loved it, because we finally got a Hulk movie without him being tied to somebody else as a character, because remember we had the ones where he fought Wolverine, and then there was one where Hulk went to Asgard. There were two stories.
It was the same. It was the same movie, but they had two
stories. Yeah,
they
had two different stories in it. And I was like, but still, they didn't feel that Hulk could carry a story, so they had to stick him with somebody else.
That's because people don't know how to write characters for film sometimes. We still get that now.
I gotta admit, the Hulk versus Wolverine gave us a great version of Deadpool.
Well, all the Weapon X characters. That was just
I shot him in the ass with this.
David?
So you mentioned it a second ago, but it was the first comic book animated movie I ever saw, and it's always stuck with me. It's always great. Bronski, your angel of death awaits, right? The Mask of the Phantasm was just, man. I mean, just the fact that it was coming off the coats of animated series, which is already such a fantastic iteration of Batman. And then that one just adding so much, it layered in history, right? To Bruce, to Joker, all this stuff, adding in this love interest, and they created this new villain that was just so interesting. And the way that whole thing played out, the ending with them being in the city of the future, just the whole way that thing ties together is fantastic. Oh, yeah. Love that movie.
I could have lived without the origin of the Joker being tied, tied to Bruce's origin again after we just had it done in the Batman movie.
Yeah.
Wasn't Grey Ghost in that one?
No.
Grey Ghost was in the TV series.
TV
series, but not in that one.
Voiced by Adam West.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
God, man.
So yeah, that movie was. I mean, it was one of the Batman animated movies we got to see in theater. Because I mean, even like Batman Sub-Zero, we didn't even see in the theater. It came out directly.
Yeah.
So
Travis says that Phantasm is where all the Batman stuff peaked.
You think that was where it peaked?
Yeah, as far as like animated Batman stuff goes.
It could have been because it was, for us who knew who Batman was, we were enjoying the cartoon, and then, but adults who didn't read comics didn't know anything about it, and they may have only known the Tim Burton movie. So when Phantasm came out, it gave adults a chance to see how great the cartoon was, and I can see that where it went and boomed the popularity of Batman the animated series. So for me, my number 2 is going to be Big Hero 6. Love that film. It's great. And it's one of the ones that I can sit down anytime and watch with my son. It's great characters. I'm looking forward to the second one. It
was different than the comic.
Correct.
But
yes,
I thought it was a great story on its own. It stood on its own.
It held on its own merits.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh, so my buddy Omega Ace Jose says that he's starting to watch the House of the Dragon today, unrated.
Oh man, I love that one.
So good.
Yep.
That whole 70s Batman martial arts style.
Watching that is like going back and watching a good old Bruce Lee
movie. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Colin?
Colin.
I'm sorry. I'm just enjoying animated afro in my brain. That's all. I'm sorry.
I thought it, but I didn't say it, and Colin beat me to it.
So, all right.
Because that was an afro.
I
And
love animated afro.
Mr. Han, what is it from Enter the Dragon?
Mr.
Mr. Han, you're like out of a
You
comic
come
book.
straight out of a comic
Out of a
book.
comic book, yeah.
All right, number 2 for me is Constantine, House of Mystery. This is the DC showcase. Because
man, that was a F over Constantine, man.
Yeah, and it follows directly. I mean, it takes place directly after Apocalypse War.
Yeah.
In storyline, it was it was the Spectre coming saying, "Hey, you did a really stupid thing by getting Flash to do another thing. Now you're gonna, boom,
this is your punishment."
Yeah, and he really got raked over the coals for it, in proper Constantine fashion. Again, goes back to.
But in the end, he does it on his own terms, though.
Yes,
it was straight up Constantine.
Yes. So, yes, Constantine can be a difficult read, but that's because it puts very real things into the greater scope of the DC universe, and especially the Vertigo stuff. It was all found its own, and it was very street level. With the tinges of supernatural activity and stuff like that, and I felt that in the House of Mystery one, it made it very, very personal feeling. Mm-hmm. So it took me all the way back, and I watch it a lot. So my only complaint is I wish it were a little longer. But
I wish that when you enjoy something, you don't want it to be over.
No.
And when it's horrible, you're like, man, let's move this along, people.
It's a respectable length, but I would have liked to have seen it a little bit longer, because there were a couple of things they could have really just, really driven it home that it was a punishment. There were some, a couple of scenes that could have really just,
And it was all the people he loved who were punishing him.
Yes, and things like Richie and stuff like that. They brought that back. They said that really, really could have. They could have, because Richie never really liked Constantine. He was friends with him, but it was more of a convenience friendship. And toward the end, when Richie was dying and he was trying to save himself because he knew John could but wouldn't, it made him more bitter about everything, and they could have really played up on that a lot more.
Yeah, because he liked John, but thought he was a bit of a wanker.
Right.
I mean, I think that's how everyone kind of feels about John. I don't know if anyone absolutely, completely, all the way through actually likes John. Everybody's just kind of like, he helps us out and stuff.
We enjoy it.
I mean, faults and all, because there are so many faults. It's literally one of those things. If you're having a bad day, you could read a Constantine book, go way back, and say, "Well, shit, it could be worse."
Well, he celebrates who he is.
Yes,
he's not ashamed of it. He's not pretending. No. He's not a poser. I'm who I am. Accept me, or off. But that's what I loved about him.
His whole attitude was, "I would shag me."
No. So I'm not talking about the people reading the comics. Like, clearly, a lot of people love John Constantine from the comic.
We're talking about in the books.
The characters in the books. I don't think
there's
all the way through likes John. They just kind of like begrudgingly are like,
there's too much baggage with John. It's like, oh hey, oh crap, I got a curse or a demon or something else that's going on in my life now.
Okay, there are two people who lean more toward like him more than Zatanna. Okay, and Zed.
Yeah.
Zed wasn't sure about him, but as they got further along, there was a thing, and then in order to try and save her, they did the thing in the tree, and then it turned out there was even worse for her, and he walked away and didn't work out for her at all. But again, the price of knowing John Constantine.
So I'm going to throw a bonus in before I tell you mine.
Okay.
And there was Showcase did a thing about death from Sandman.
Yes.
The what was that line called again? I forget.
Are you talking about what they are?
No, from Hellblazer. That was under a heading. I can't remember. I hate when then I go to say something. It disappears between the brain and the mouth. That whole series of books that they did, they were all part of a group,
All the Sandman
Vertigo stuff.
Vertigo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and so they did a Showcase it was like a 20-minute one of her. And I thought, man, that is really good. And it just made me hungry before Sandman came out. And now I'm thinking, man, Sandman would be an excellent movie. There needs to be a Sandman animated movie.
Yeah.
Just think of all the things they could have brought in that they couldn't do in the live action series. But for me, I guess it's a tie, and I love both of these. It's All-Star Superman.
Okay.
Because it was just well done. And it reminded me, it had the heart of what was in the comic series. And then Superman Unbound, because it was that fight with Brainiac I've been dying to see. The shrunken cities, it's Superman just cutting loose, Very few times in Superman's life has he ever got to just cut loose on a villain. Once was against Apocalypse and Darkseid. Once was when he fought the Doomsday, yeah. Except it cost him his life.
Oh yeah. Every time you hit a guy that he just gets.
Yeah, well, and the thing about Doomsday originally was if you killed him one way, you couldn't kill him that way again.
Yeah.
So if you broke his neck and he comes back, you can't break his neck anymore. And that's why later on in the stories from the comics, he had to find new ways to get rid of Doomsday, like throwing him to the Big Bang and all and other stuff. But that fight with Brainiac I'd just been waiting for that for a long time, because Brainiac's one of my favorite villains, and not so much the original one where he was just the alien going around shrinking everything like a collector. But one later on, after Bryan had revamped Superman, and they made him possessed. He was a clairvoyant, stage act who was pretend to read people's minds, and this entity from space goes into him and changes him, and then in the end, they meld to become what we would consider Brainiac. And then to try to beat Superman, he keeps adding things to himself and augmenting himself, and then he becomes more the cyborg, a nanite Brainiac. And it's everything I love about Superman was in that book, that story. So those were tied at the same place for me, because I love them both at the same time.
You gave out 2 free ones, an extra to your number 2, and the Showcase death.
Well, so, that tied in with his.
I got you. Yeah. So, it should be no surprise what my number 1 is. I talked about it at length, ad nauseum earlier. It's Green Lantern, Emerald Knights, because it's everything that I love about Green Lantern.
Do you need a tissue?
Yes.
Somebody give him a tissue and a wet wipe.
Yeah, I'm just gonna cuddle it for.
I saw you pick it out, and was that what you pulled out of the shelf a minute ago?
Oh no, a second ago I was trying to remember if the Blu-ray rendition of the Batman the Animated Series came with Sub-Zero, because I knew it came with Phantasm, and it does. So it came with the first.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, Emerald Knights. God, so good.
Oh, good.
All right, so my number 1.
David's gonna step off screen for a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just need a couple seconds, guys. Give me.
So my number 1 is going to be, of course, no surprise for anybody who knows me, but Batman Under the Red Hood. Love that movie. Great cast, just a great story. Jason Todd coming back.
Yeah.
Then Batman taking a while to try to figure it out. You got Neil Patrick Harris as Dick Grayson, Nightwing.
Yeah, it was some good
the idea of Jason Todd trying to, he wanted Batman to kill him because he wanted Jason Todd such a tragic life, and he truly thought of Bruce as his dad. He had daddy issues to begin with, and so that whole just you want to do it, you want to do it for me, trying to push him across the line that he'd already crossed himself.
Cool.
Even though Bruce always thought that he could save him, regardless.
Hey, the kid stole his damn tires off the Batmobile. He was trouble from the beginning.
Hey, and Batman could have saved him, but the audience voted otherwise.
Yeah, well, in the
hold on.
in the comics.
Yeah, I mean, this way, like this. Yeah, these two.
And then
did y'all call in to vote him dead?
And then they did the show. Was it Showcase? Yeah, Death in the Family, which was just a
the choose your own adventure thing.
You choose your own adventure, yeah.
Which made it interesting to try and watch it digitally because it didn't give you the.
It didn't work very well.
The Death in the Family, the DVD, the one where
where it was you choose your own adventure.
Yeah, that was the only way you could really watch that, and it was the only way it would work.
Yeah, because you couldn't do it on digital. You had to have the Blu-ray disc.
No. So I watched it once, and I'm like, I can't do that again. that was kind of harsh. So, all right, whose turn?
Yours.
Number
one.
Yours.
Number one, and this should be no surprise, Constantine, City of Demons. It was a very faithful recreation from a storyline from the books. The only story that I enjoyed more than that was was it Original Sins? Well, Original Sins was the first set of ones, and then there was the storyline where he got the cancer, and I can't think. Dangerous Habits.
Yeah.
If they had done that one, I would have just,
I think I would have preferred that one, Dangerous Habits, because I was watching, what is it, the Legion, or whatever that show was on CW, which Constantine joined up with the League of it, and
Legends of Tomorrow.
Legends of Tomorrow, and they did that story arc where he went to hell and trying to save the girl that he had tried to. And I was like, man, it's just so soon after that one, but it's great. I have them all, just like you do. It's just I wanted, sometimes if you've seen something and it's recent, you want a different story.
Right.
But
yeah, because that was one of the things I liked about Legends was the fact that they were able to wrap up the Constantine TV series. They were able to give him a proper, send off, and Constantine actually carried that show for a couple of seasons.
Sure did.
Because Matt Ryan
because they got lost, and his character was the driving force behind everything.
So being able to go back and forth between the Legends and then the animated stuff that was out there, there was him doing the voice for, he did, like, even recently did it in the Harley Quinn episode there that he was in.
Yeah, the one with the one that you told me to watch, one with the Swamp Thing.
Yeah,
that was in it. Yeah, that was really good. That ended up being a really good episode. I don't always like the Harlequin, but that one I really did like.
So, sorry, go ahead, Colin, real quick, and
I'm just trying to, because they also in the Justice League, what was it, Justice League Action or whatever it was, the third incarnation, they had him in that. Even those were enjoyable. But now City of Demons is just, because I remember when they were still putting it out in parts. It was going to be 3 parts, and then it was going to be 2 parts, and they put the first half out, and then nothing, and they said like a year later, oh, it's going to be a whole movie. The rest of it's going to be out there. So it was just whole. So I had all the parts and everything.
One thing with Justice League Action, they brought in characters like Blue Beetle. They did the Cabbie, who was from the old comics. They did the Constantine story. Got to see Lobo again. Yeah. There was some really good, and they were short. They were like each episode was 2 15-minute episodes. But yeah, that one ended way before its time because I thought it was going to become another Justice League Unlimited or something like that. And it didn't happen.
Yeah, and then there was the Halloween episode where they were turned into kids.
That was fantastic.
They were yelling at each other. They were saying each other's names in costume as kids. I mean, I was loving that.
And some of that bled into Young Justice because some of the story arcs that began in the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited went into Young Justice, and I really like that, and the whole Dr. Fate stuff.
Yeah, one of the two of the best episodes. One of the best episodes from Unlimited, and one of the best episodes in Young Justice. And Unlimited was when Mordred got the amulet of old magic or whatever it was called, and he used it to banish all adults from the world. And so in order to go back and fight against him, they transformed Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern back into kids. And then what was so great about that is they got thrown down into a pit to fight, an evil monster, and it turned out to be Baby Etrigan. And then Wonder Woman just turned on her mom voice and shouted him down. And then they made Superman go chant. I love that episode. It was so good. And then the great episode that kind of tied into that from Young Justice was when Clarion did the same sort of deal. But what was cool about it was you had in both worlds the same central point where the magic was going on, and you had all of the younger heroes going to attack Clarion, and then you had all the older heroes going to attack, I forget who all was there fighting him. But in order to coordinate between the two teams, Billy was transforming
back and forth,
and Captain Marvel, and going back and forth between them so that they could coordinate their attacks to try and take down. So yeah, whenever they play around with that concept, it's always a lot of fun. They do have a lot of fun with that stuff.
I think the biggest mistake DC's made is stopping Young Justice. Because that could be your anchor. That could be,
that could have been such a bridge between all of them.
Well,
we got Static Shock in the show too. I mean,
yeah.
There was a lot of good stuff that they could have done.
It wasn't just Static though. You had Static, you had Icon, and you had the girl who works with Icon.
Yeah, the one with the visor thing. Mm-hmm. I can't remember her name because she became real prominent when they started introducing Orion and the New Gods. Because remember, she ended up being the ambassador. And
so, I mean, it's a great series, and they just never seem to know what they got.
So
until it's too late, and then they would try to recapture it.
So before Dad gets into his number one, Ryan said when David was doing his this pose, this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He said you're like posing like Swayze and Roadhouse.
Roadhouse.
There you go. I like it.
Jose said that he wasn't a big fan of the animated Marvel movies, but he really liked Planet Hulk. Ryan asked about what was our thoughts on the Spawn movie from the 90s, not the animated TV show, but the movie. And I just said that we enjoyed it back then, but I dislike it now because it's nothing to do
it doesn't hold up.
And the CGI does not hold up at all.
No, and that was my biggest takeaway from Spawn, the movie, was when he kind of floats down into the banquet hall, and his cape is just like everywhere. It has no rhyme or reason, and then it goes into him. I was like, no. And then I believe that the guy they got to play, Jason Wynn, right? His handler was Martin Sheen.
Yeah,
in I think in live action it was Martin Sheen. I was like, there was no real threat there,
He's too old.
I was like, kind of, you know what? Give him somebody he could play off of. And Violator, they just made into Leguizamo was perfect as the clown, but
the rest of it left us violated.
Violated.
Chapel wasn't even in because they had like the falling out and had to move him over to another. I mean, he like the creator was mad at Image and McFarlane, so they moved him. He moved off to something else. So they put this girl agent who portrayed him in the movie.
Yeah.
So I mean, and then Ryan said, "Hold on, what's up, Vin? How you doing, man?" Ryan said that he said that the Marvel movies missed something for him. He just couldn't figure out what it was, so they just didn't gel with him, the animated ones.
Yeah, by and large, that was true. I mean, DC was, bounds ahead of the Marvel stuff. I mean, occasionally they would crank out something that was cool, like Vince said, the Iron Man movie. The Doctor Strange animated movie was really good, I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my number one.
That would be my. That was your number one.
Number one is the first Iron Man movie.
No,
Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, because I had been waiting forever to see a Doctor Strange film, and I never thought we'd get a live action. And then back in the day, we had to settle for the Hulk TV show, the one-shot movies like Captain America wearing a motorcycle helmet and
with the rubber ears.
Well, no, not that one. That one came out about the same time as the Fantastic Four movie.
Yes.
No, this is even before that. These were TV-made movies.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. The helmet
and Jeff Brown or whatever his name was played
Red Brown.
Red Brown, yeah, and he's not even playing Captain Steve Rogers. He's playing his son at one point, and you're like, this is horrible. And then they bring in Christopher Lee to play the villain, and he's just not. He's like, I'm just going to stand here and talk. This is my villain stance, I was like, okay,
was it supposed to be the Red Skull?
Death too soon.
And then what was the other one? Oh, and then the Doctor Strange live action TV show, which was Mordred from Full Moon was more Doctor Strange than that was Doctor Strange.
Oh man, that I mean, it's cringeworthy, but I still watch it because
I tried not too long ago to watch it again, and I was like, oh, I can't.
No, one I can't watch again is the Hasselhoff Nick Fury movie.
Nick Fury movie.
They just added that back on HBO, not HBO, on one of the channels. Disney, I think, has got it on there.
I don't know. Compared to that porn star looking Doctor Strange one-off looks so much better.
Well, you know what was great? Dum Dum Dugan, the guy that they got to play Dum Dum Dugan in the Hasselhoff movie, he was straight up the right character. I mean, I liked the guy who they got to play in the Captain America First Avenger, because Dum Dum is one of my favorite characters, and at least they got him right in that horrible movie. And then they did give us the flying car in it. That was just like when Daredevil fought Kingpin in the Daredevil Trial of the Hulk, I think.
Trial of the Hulk.
Yeah, and I was like, I'll take it. We might not get anything better than this, but wow. But Doctor Strange, the animated movie, was perfect. I mean, of course there's flaws when you do something in an animated film. You're not going to get to do certain scenes because you're aiming towards an audience that's predominantly children. But there was enough real horror kind of there, which I've always been a horror fan, especially old horror comics. Like seeing all those kids in those beds and him being a doctor and he can't figure out what he can do to save, and Dormammu and everything else that went into that. Those two, the Iron Man and the Doctor Strange, are my two favorites in the Marvel films, followed by Planet Hulk. Those are my three. I could watch them over and over again.
Yeah, those were some of the early ones too, and they started getting it right, and then they decided to reboot, and that's when they did like the Young Avengers and things like that.
And then they did that one, the Tales of Asgard, which was Thor and Loki as kids.
Yeah, but that was like a stop motion looking.
Well, they also did the not Age of Ultron, but something Ultron, where they had the kids of the superheroes having to fight him.
That was Young
Avengers.
Okay.
Oh, speaking of things that got added to Disney Plus, Spectacular Spider-Man's finally on there.
Yeah, I saw that.
The longest time I kept looking, I'm like, yeah, Spectacular's got to be on here, right? Nope, it's just Ultimate. It was literally every Spider-Man except for Spectacular. And then the other day, I forget what we were flipping around on. I was just going through, and all of a sudden, I saw it go past. I was like, "Oh crap! It's finally on here! Awesome! I'm glad. Such a good series. Deserves more love, but oh, they will."
Now, if
I
we
wish
get
one
no
of them would hurry
Home
up and add the third movie for the Mortal Kombat animated movies. I'm loving those. And the third one's out, but I don't want to buy it on digital when I want to own it, and it'd be easier for it to just be put onto one of the many streaming services that I pay monthly to that might not exist after a year.
So I'm going to add one last thing, and we can wrap up the episode now.
All right.
If there was any graphic novel or a collected volume of something that you could get to be animated, well, which run would that be, or which one?
I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning of the episode, Watchmen. I no homogenized Zack Snyder thing. I want the grit that was in there. If not that, then the original. Yeah. Either that or the original League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah. The first 6 books.
Yes.
The second one with the War of the Worlds stuff was okay.
Man get raped to death by Hyde that bad?
Huh?
Well, Hyde did what Hyde did to the Invisible Man. What
I had nothing to hide.
Else. I got nothing to hide.
Invisible Man didn't go a good way in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
No.
He hurt Mina, which pissed off Hyde, and
Well, Hyde's very much the Hulk from the Ultimates.
Yeah. I love Dracula. I love the whole Mina Harker story. And even when I was reading that, I hated the fact that they turned her into that she was part vampire. And then they went even worse when they did the movie. You know, she is full on vampire. And the whole thing was that because of her connection to the Dracula and him almost turning her, she could sense them. You know, she could sense Nosferatu and all those other things. But yeah, watching an old ass Alan Quatermain getting lucky was you know, like, wow.
Thanks, Alan Moore. I really appreciate that visual.
What I really liked was the throwback to all the old literature. You know, man, there are so many references. Yeah,
I mean, that could become a franchise, animated wise, if the right people got on board with it.
And Alan Moore would hate every single second.
Every
Bless his heart.
I just read a new interview where he was talking about where things are in the industry. He hates Americans. He hates comics. You know, he calls us lots of.
Alan Moore hates everything except for the giant bales of weed that get delivered to his house every day. It's fine.
And the money from all of the royalty checks from everything he's done.
Well, how do you think he gets the weed?
How do you get those bales of weed?
That's right.
Direct deposited right into his dealer's
all that
account.
green and converts it into another form of green, and he's good.
I bet if you walk by his house, you'd get a contact high that could send you to the moon. You know?
Walk by his house. I'm pretty sure if you're like within his zip code, you're like, all right then.
Well, I guess wouldn't it rub off though that you become like this great writer too?
I don't know about that.
I don't know.
You might start having weird dreams of snake gods. That might happen.
Yeah, even Snoop Dogg called him and said, "Man, bro, you got to calm down."
Right? Good. Let's turn it down a little bit.
And you're giving us a bad name.
Dial it back.
That's right.
So, trades.
I know David went to go grab one. He can go next.
I mean, we already said it, but I decided to grab it. The nail.
Yeah.
And then the backside shows another nail, right? Because like one of the coolest concepts, and I know I've talked about it before, but like right here.
So is that a compilation of them? Big Barda and Miracle Man? Yeah.
Right here, right? Big Barda, she gets the mother box, right? Scott, Mr. Miracle saves her from Apocalypse, but in the process of it, he dies. But in his dying moment, his consciousness gets impressed upon the mother box, and then Big Barda becomes the Green Lantern of Apocalypse in that whole sector. And Scott is able to project himself through the ring as a construct, but it's Scott, right? It's not Big Barda thinking of Scott and creating him.
No, it's his essence.
Yeah. Actually, Scott creating himself through the process of the ring via the mother box. It's just, it's one of the cooler concepts that they put together with the ring and something else to be able to generate. Is
that both stories? Because I have them individually. I don't have
because the nail ends with them finding Superman on the Amish farm, and then after this portion of it kicks in. So yeah, it's a nail and another nail put together into one little volume.
Mine are like those, like what Gotham by Gaslight. They were full comic, but they were bigger. I was like, man, that must have extra stuff, because when I hold my two together, they wouldn't make up that. So I wonder if that has extra stuff in it.
I don't know. I haven't seen it, so.
I think it's just bigger print, and then there's like afterwards, like extra art, just
talking about the process of making the book and stuff like that. Usually
all the various covers, right? So that's all it is.
Okay. Dad, you got yours?
No, I'm still thinking. Did you do yours yet?
No, I know which. Technically I have two. I'm gonna probably just depends. So.
Well, you were saying something about Identity Crisis.
Well, I would love to see Identity Crisis done. Yeah, I'll just throw that out there, because there's so many of them that it's really hard to choose. But Identity Crisis really changed the DC universe. Or Crisis on the Infinite Earth, a real Crisis on the Infinite Earth.
Yeah.
Okay, so of course I told mine earlier, and that's why I was coming up with something different. I'd love to see The Last Ronin either made into 2 movies or 4-part miniseries with the last turtle in his adventure to get revenge for his brothers being killed. But the one I was coming up for the end part here would be, I'd love to see a full-on first 12 issues of Spider-Man 2099. I want to see Miguel O'Hara like how true to form of how he is in the comic, and not the goofiness that we got with Into the Multiverse and then some of the stuff we've gotten in some of the games where he's a little bit goofy. I want that. I want that dark future, and it would kind of be cool to even do the whole crossover event, maybe, where you had Punisher, the Fantastic Four, and Ravage 2099. There was that big arc.
Yeah.
Yeah. World War III, all the stories that were together.
Another one.
Now that you've said that, a character that I think they could do something with now is Starbrand. Since they've tied him into the Marvel Universe so heavily, and he was one of the new universe brand of Marvel, where it was a real world, how it would be like if there were heroes. I always Starbrand and the one guy called Justice.
Yeah.
Who was almost like a Punisher and Judge Dredd rolled into one.
That's another one too. Having an animated Dredd movie with Carl Urban coming back to do the voice of Dredd would be fantastic, and just continue to do it that way. Because if it's too expensive to do a Dredd movie, let's get an animated going. Because there's so much stuff to tell in Mega City 1 and Judge Death and all that other fantastic stuff. That could be great. And
that could be another franchise.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that would be probably more economically feasible if the right people wanted to back it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, HBO could pick it up and do a series like they used to do with friggin' Spawn, which was fantastic. I loved every episode. And McFarlane told us we were going to get another Spawn series. Where is it?
Well, he's got remember, he's working on the movie at the moment with Jamie Foxx as Al Simmons. So
I don't want Jamie Foxx as Al Simmons. We got him as Electro. Give somebody else a break,
I mean, you want somebody that's going to be able to have the physique and the I mean, because you've got if he, depending on how he's going to do it, is it going to be an origin movie again? Is it going to be him getting double crossed by Chapel?
So here's my question: How much is Jamie Foxx going to want to sit in makeup chair?
Yeah,
or are we going to have more flashbacks of him as Al than we have Spawn?
Well, maybe we'll have
hire somebody who's willing to be that character. Carl Urban is willing to wear a mask through the entire movie.
True.
And there aren't a lot of actors like him.
And that is my problem with G.I. Joe. You cast a face actor to be Snake Eyes. It's great until the point he gets hurt, but then you also made him a villain of his own movie. But I'm not going to go into this argument here. But maybe we'll get Hamburger Face Jamie Foxx.
I think.
And I only say that because that's
since we had Al Simon's story, I think it would be nice to. There's so many different Spawns. I would love to see a story about a medieval Spawn. I would like to see the Western Spawn. Just give us something new.
Having actually doing the first arc where he's going after the ice cream. Was it Kincaid?
Kincaid, yeah.
Yeah, and then like the ice cream
serial killer.
Yeah.
And he was modeled after Gacy.
Yes.
Except instead of being a clown, he was
an ice cream man. Yeah, Ricky's in the chat. He's a side dad. He says he doesn't know how he feels about Jamie Foxx playing Spawn either. So I don't know. I mean, I'd have to.
I've been wrong before.
True.
I mean, I wasn't big on Tim Burton playing.
Tim Burton.
I mean, not Tim Burton. Michael Keaton playing Batman and Tim Burton until I saw Clean and Sober. Up until then, I thought of him as a comedic actor.
Yes.
And Clean and Sober changed my mind about his acting jobs. Same thing happened with I'm sorry, Wolverine is 5'7". He's a short little guy who's wiry and
5'4" or whatever.
5'4". I'm sorry, 5'4". Yeah. I'm 5'7", so I'm 3 inches taller than Wolverine. And then they go and get Hugh Jackman, and who I'd seen in musicals and other things, and I knew he was a tall, big guy, and I was like, and remember, this is before The Hobbit, so we didn't know about the whole how they could shrink somebody down to make him look
practical effects and stuff.
And Harry Potter, because they did the same thing with Hagrid to make him look giant, but I always loved him as an actor. I just couldn't. He was too big for me to play the role of Wolverine. I was like, this is going to be like this big lumbering dude, where you think of Cyclops as being tall and thin and built like Hugh Jackman was originally. Yeah. Not Wolverine. Wolverine is stocky. He's almost like a pit fighter. One of those.
And you think of like, and I only bring this up because he had the build, but Chris Benoit, even though he went through all that stuff and killed his family, but he had the build of Wolverine. Yeah, he was that short, stocky, just and you need someone like that as far as that build to play Wolverine, or someone that could get to that point but not be so overimposing of the other characters. You know, and I honestly would like to see a good Cyclops instead of whiny.
Don't you said don't get you started on something. You know how I feel about that
I know.
friggin' movie.
The Bryan Singer does not know
I
anything
liked
about
1 and
X-Men.
2. I could live with it. The fact that he had Cyclops listening to Boys to Men made me angry, and then to have Jean Grey obliterate him, which she would never have done ever. Even if she was evil, she wouldn't have killed him. Bryan Singer. There are certain directors I just would just, if I walked up to him, I'd slap him. Okay,
Well,
handcuff me. It's worth it.
He's got
because
himself in enough trouble as is. So
There's been enough slapping in his
yeah,
world.
there's enough going on. Karma's come back to like the Stan Lee's ghost is like came back and all that stuff and Chris Claremont. Even if
okay, so before we go, I got a question. Ask the panel. I guess we're a panel. We've kind of talked about our favorite animes. We've talked about movies and stuff we don't like. We talked about ones we hope to see. All right. What is a live action superhero adaptation that you think was successful? And we don't have to really go too heavy in discussing it, but it would be, yeah, that you walked out and said, you know what, I have no complaints.
I mean, the only one that I can think of that I came out of that I had the littlest issue with was The Winter Soldier. Like, by far, that movie, I came out of it, and the most I could say was the fighting in the very beginning on the ship was a little too shaky cammy. But after that, the whole rest of that movie settled in. It just hit on so many different cylinders for me, right? You had the like classic pulp story where you have a Nazi scientist that's impressed his brain on an entire bunker's worth of computers, right? You just had all of the spy stuff going on top of the already present superhero stuff, everything going on the butt, just everything. It was the closest I've come to saying, yeah, that was perfect.
Perfect movie. Yeah. I gotta agree with that. And then the only thing I complained about was Batroc wasn't Batroc to me. He's the kicker, the guy he fights on the ship.
The Leaper, yeah.
The Leaper, yeah.
He was not the Leaper.
He was really not Batroc, but hey, overall it was an excellent film.
Yeah.
Who's next? Because I'm trying to think.
I'm gonna have to go with the first Avenger, Captain America: The First Avenger. I can't honestly think of any complaints that I had about it, and it was one of those ones where I hadn't really bought a superhero movie in a while, but when it dropped and I have it, the edition I got is the 3-disc. The DVD, the Blu-ray, and the 3D.
And okay,
because I did, and it was like an extra $10, to get it, so it cost me like almost 40 when I was done, but I didn't even have to think twice about it. I said, I don't have any way to play 3D movies. I may never have any way to play 3D movies, but I've got it.
And it was one of those films that I'll watch anytime it's on.
Yeah.
If I'm flipping through and it's on, I've seen it, I don't know how many times. I'll sit and finish watching it. Yeah. It was perfect all the way through.
I love the outfit. The way they did the shield. I mean, for me, the pace of the movie was great.
The one thing that I wish that they had done a little bit different, and I think it would have really, really set the tone of the movie well, is in the middle of it when they're doing the montage of all of his missions with the Howling Commandos. If they had done that in the style of the old World War II war update type of thing,
where they were black and white and they looked like the newsreels.
Yes, right? That would have been cool.
It was kind of like, like my brother hates that part of that movie, and I don't hate it. I'm like, yeah, this could have been done a little better, but that's that's really the only part of it I'd really say is they missed the mark just a little bit, just a little bit.
If they had,
and if they had just had them like spin up newspaper image and then newsreels, and you had that same guy doing the voices, that used to do the Mr. America, and all that, give it that nostalgia feel.
Yes.
I can see that. I can understand that.
Yeah, I would go along the similar lines. I love the black and white idea, but instead of like the newspaper thing, actually have it like because all of those battalions had cameramen in them.
Oh yeah. You could have done the whole thing of like you could have shown audiences in theaters, like, and it's like, oh, war update, because like they used to do back then.
Yeah,
right. And the fact that Bucky Barnes
shots, but from different angles.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Bucky Barnes' job was in the old comics. He was the Cap's photographer. He was supposed to capture all their adventures on television, on camera, so they could get that back to the American people and sell more service bonds and keep people into the war, because you're afraid when you're in a war that the death toll and all these other things are going to start making people want to pull out.
Mm-hmm.
It's too costly. And he was there taking photographs and everything.
Yeah.
And he didn't even know who Cap was at the time. He didn't know he was Steve. He figured it out,
Yep.
So
Joe Rogan for Wolverine?
Mm-mm.
Back in the day, maybe, because he's so short.
No. No.
It's in the chat.
No, Ricky said that. He was
no.
I told him he would never stop doing his podcast to do that.
Only if we can resurrect Chris Farley and have him play Superman in a van down by the river.
Wouldn't it be the Blob?
Hey. No hating on fat people.
I'm not.
I'm fat.
Anyway, so I was like, man, what can I say about a movie that, a comic book movie that left me satisfied? I have like joke answers like, Ricky O, just because Andrew would pop in here, has to, say that. The Guyver.
You're going to be up here tomorrow. I'm going to get you for that.
The Guyver with J.J. Walker. No, okay, I'm going to be serious. For me, really, it's just going to be Dredd.
The second one.
Yes.
So Dredd, not Judge Dredd.
Judge Dredd.
Judge Dredd, yeah, Dredd. Just Dredd.
Carl Urban one.
Yeah.
I am the law.
I'm the law. I'm the law.
I'm the law.
No, but yeah, no, Dredd's just fantastic. Visually, the 3D, getting to see that in 3D was fantastic. It worked really well because of the, that was one of the movies that was actually filmed using, I think, the same camera technology that Cameron used for Avatar. But it was great getting to see Dredd through the whole movie never take off his helmet. Seeing him as the badass that we know he is in the comic, and it was great. And
I love Dredd. I took Logan to see it with his dad, not knowing how bad that movie was going to be. And Josh goes, I can't believe you brought us this. I said, you're his dad. I can't believe you let him come in here. And we were both, don't tell your mother. And but I had seen the raid recently.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, and I was all hyped up about that. And then I go and see, and I'm like,
it's the same movie.
A little plagiarism going on here.
Well, it's not
because it's exactly the same movie.
Well, it's almost the similar premise, but you don't have a bunch of police officers raiding into a building and then watch them all get gunned down one by one.
By one, yeah.
Just you have just Dredd and his trainee going into this building. And
well, I like the fact that he went up against the crooked judges.
Yes.
I loved the drug effect, where
slow-mo.
Slow-mo. I mean, it had its moments. I love that movie, but having seen one and then go and walk into a theater and seeing basically the same thing, I was like, felt the same way I did when I saw Turtles and realized it was the same thing as the first Amazing Spider-Man. The whole principle behind it.
It's one of those things that movie left me in a spot where like I felt like I was there in the world. This was the first movie that I felt like I was kind of like what
In
the comic was trying to portray. Because the Stallone movie is too. It's just too gimmicky. It was too slapstick. It wasn't like you felt like you were really in that world. Everything was seemed over exaggerated, which I know the comics were over exaggerated, but it didn't break your immersion while you're reading the comic.
It wasn't okay. Dredd is Dredd in Dredd. Again,
Yes.
can I say it? Carl Urban, the character is who he's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Judge Dredd was Arnold. I almost said Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That would have been a different movie.
That would have been a total different movie.
No,
that was
helmet.
Sylvester Stallone playing something.
Yes.
And like I told you, when we first found out that he was cast, I said 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I give it 15 minutes before the mask comes off. And I think it actually came off sooner. So I was like, yeah, I knew it wasn't going to be good. I enjoyed it. It was still funny.
Oh, it was funny, yeah. I mean, it's still an enjoyable movie, but
Rob Schneider.
My favorite part of that movie was the robot.
Yes.
That's,
the war droid or whatever he was, yeah.
I mean, you got Max von Sydow in the movie too, but I mean, come on.
Even Max von Sydow can't save some movies.
All right. Well, Dad, let's get yours because we're going.
Really I'm yes, it's a flawed movie, but Tim Burton's Batman.
Yeah.
Tim Burton's Batman brought comic books back to the theater.
Yeah.
It showed that you could do something that was a comic. Fan base would love it. People who weren't comic book fans would love it. It just appealed to everything I loved about Batman. And it was so iconic that it's what made Batman the animated series work. Even the music was the same.
Yeah.
And we got so many great things because of that movie. And then we got the writers and creators of these comics who were dying broke were starting to be recognized again, and they were rewarded and given some of the money that they had been owed and the appreciation by the fans. So we owe a lot to that movie.
It was technically, if you think about it, it was the movie that literally broke comics into the industry even further than what they were. I mean, it really brought it to a mainstream.
Yeah.
Well, up until then, they were relegated to, being popcorn flicks, B movies that, you're only going to get a certain audience. Remember when that came out, the lines that you had to go through to get in there, and then the crowds in the thing, the soundtrack having Prince do the music for it. And, and Jack Nicholson was just freaking iconic as the Joker.
Yeah, he's...
but again, it's something we've all talked about. Killing off the Joker at the end, I was like, man, don't do it, because then you limit. And the minute they killed off the Joker, I knew after that we were going to have every movie would see the villain end up dead. And so we're going to keep going until we run through all the bodies in the Rogues Gallery, and then Batman's going to go away. But yeah, I guess that would be my number one pick.
And I'm going to say an honorable mention, and it's not even like it's that great of a movie, but I still think that Dolph Lundgren's Punisher is great, especially if they had given him the freaking skull on his
or
shirt.
At least a bulletproof vest with it on.
Yes.
Something.
But, all right.
Again, any movie with Louis Gossett Jr. in it, it's great. He even made Jaws 3 work.
Jaws Revenge? No. Anyway, everyone, we hope you enjoyed this episode of us discussing comics and adaptations and all this stuff and cartoons. I know it went a little long, but this is normally how our podcasts go, and I just kind of edited down the things, so make it a manageable 2 hours. Like I said, this is fun. I'm glad everything worked out this time. So next time, on episode 70, we will definitely go down the rabbit hole for sure. But we will be live again. But next week will be the normal pre-recorded episode. We haven't figured out what we're going to discuss just yet, but there are some topics and things that we want to bring up. But everyone have a fantastic night. I hope y'all enjoyed this. Have a great weekend. We'll catch you later. Peace out, guys.
Be safe, everybody.
Finland!
So I think we should do